Going on. Well, you were telling me a story.
Yeah.
And I wanted to hear about it. So what was insane about what you were saying? I was like, you're going bear hunting with your dad and he's 81 years old. I'm like, hold on a second. Like, your dad's 81 years old going bear hunting?
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you can continue telling that story if you don't mind.
The bear hunt story or Mark Bouchard?
I mean, both. You're kind of like going through with it.
Well, you asked how I got connected to Sean and Chance with the collective. And I think it's through either Mark Bouchard, who has what I think is one of the best books for first responders, but he can't market it, or he could, but then he gives it away for free. And the big difference is he's a hockey guy and was on a full-time tactical unit, really high speed. And what happened in his story was, listen, I think something's off. I want to get help. So he talks to his buddies and supervisors, and everybody tells him, dude, you might lose your SWAT position. It's called ERT up there, Emergency Response Team. And he's like, yeah, but I got shit going on mentally. Like, I'm a danger to the team if I don't address this. And everybody's like, you're going to lose your spot on this coveted position. So before he gets a DUI, second or third divorce, gets arrested, has an IA investigation, which is a lot of the stories of cops that write books and then speak at the mental health conferences, including the one in San Diego, right? The stories get up and it's, I totally fucked up my life. I ignored my mental health. I didn't do for a cop my firearms, my fitness, or my hand-to-hand training. Use of force went sideways. I either have to quit because the job's too stressful, or I have severe PTSD, in part maybe because I wasn't prepared and I ignored my problems and I self-medicated. And the bottom line is, it's okay not to be okay. So that's a lot of the first responder and veteran mental health scene. So what does a high speed or a high functioning cop, firefighter, or veteran do? Well, I don't relate to the guy cheating on his third wife that got a DUI, that had to dump somebody because they were out of shape or they couldn't fight. And so these resources either aren't for me or I don't want to burden them. Like, SISM, incident debriefs. I've been on dead cop ones on the West and East Coast. And during the debrief, I would love it if everybody spoke up, but this has been my experience. If a rookie on the perimeter speaks up, or somebody from dispatch, and they're rattled, the dudes that were in the gunfight or the firefighters that were trying to save somebody's life that didn't make it, and they carry that burden, is there something else I could have done? Well, if the dispatcher and the person on perimeter are speaking up, well, this debrief is for people that really can't handle it, because I was trying to save that life, or I'm the one that had to shoot the guy, and I'm not that bad. So I don't want to burden the resources for the other people. So it's not always the stigma, but we present mental health and wellness for what I say is right a bang. You got to hit rock bottom before you get help. And the message is, it's okay not to be okay. But then we're going to wait until we have a mouthful of cavities before we go to the dentist.
Right.
Or we learn to brush and floss. Sure. And so we still stigmatize mental health and wellness if we only have people that are grossly out of shape, that decide to lose 50 pounds because they got diagnosed with diabetes and they had a heart attack. Well, what about the cop and the firefighter that played high school and college sports, never quit working out? I'm glad you lost weight, but that's not inspiring to me. I've been working out hard my whole life, and guess what? Shit's still hard. There's something else going on that I will perceive you don't understand. And then there's a lot of people that get attached to the wounded part of their story as their new identity. I was the cop, I was the firefighter, I was the team guy in the military. Now I'm the person with PTSD, and that's how I get speaking engagements or life coach packages that I'm selling. So it still benefits me to some degree, and I avoid doing my deeper work by being the fixer and helper, which happens on peer support too. Like, you want
100%.
you want people that have street experience. But I say it's like evangelizing. Somebody that just found Jesus and they haven't learned to walk the talk, and they're running around Bible thumping everybody. It's like, dude, you're not living it. I don't see the fruits of you living this spiritual life. And now you're the one evangelizing it. It's the same with keto, carnivore, and peer support as well. Or this brand of martial arts, or this technique of meditation. It's a cure for everybody's issue. But I don't see you walking the talk for 5 or 10 years of your life You get on peer support or in a clergy do this, mental health professionals do this. I'm going to help everybody with their problems and avoid my deeper work. And then the people speaking at peer support end up relapsing into from alcohol to drugs or go through another divorce. And then people that have sat in on their talks or they're on peer support, they're like, this, it kind of discredits it to some degree. And I'm not discrediting their story because they're hurting, but we're not talking about this is hard work to some degree. And can we try to talk about it before you have to hit rock bottom? Is it just PTSD, addiction, and suicide? That's mental health? Or is it taking care of your mental health even when you get out of the academy and you're in training and then you start hitting your first dead body calls or whatever it is? Are you compartmentalizing it, drinking, screwing, buying toys, working overtime? Or is it okay to say, dude, that kind of rattled me? And not on the call, because we can't do it on the call, but in the locker room or with a trusted friend, can you say, dude, that call like made my heart heavy to see that person suffer? Or, you know what, I'd like to throttle the child molester or the wife beater. Like I have anger about that. Can't let it out on them, but can you just be aware of your feelings and talk about it?
You're bringing up a lot of good points. So I love how you're approaching this. We're kind of looking at like, okay, so where do we start? We've seen some type of architecture that seems to be, has false foundations, right? And then you have a lot of these people who kind of have the ebb and flow product of their life where they got through a crisis, and they got some tools, probably from therapy or whatever, but they have a hard time sustaining it and have a hard time embodying it. And I think that's where a lot of the lies are kind of like seeping through the cracks is embodying. Embodying is a spiritual practice. It's a mind, body, spirit connection. It's to become embodied where you're treating everything a bit more with reverence and sanctity and having a different viewpoint on yourself. You're continuing your inner work, and through that inner work, you're now reflecting a light that is emanating, and that light just seeps into other people. That's really how I've seen what embodiment is. And you probably have more of a direct relationship with that while you're traveling the country, right? And then you're experiencing so many different masks, and then you actually run into people who you find to be somewhat of a leader and who are embodying. And so I think those are the people we should lean into because they really are leading the way. And that's kind of like what we'll find over the time is like you see these wolves too within the peer support group programs, and also through they see dollar signs, they see capitalism, and they prey on other people's traumas and other people's vulnerability. And I've seen that as well. So I've seen agencies crumble because that was their intent. And I've seen individuals who were trying to help in those facilities leave because they saw the calamity that was going on. And so I think there's a lot of destruction going on, but through that destruction, I really truly believe that there's some beauty in it. Some things are evolving out of the crumbling false scaffolding that's been going on. And so I think we're in the middle of that. And so for me personally, I want to band together the best human beings who are not a part of that and who are emanating like this bright light that we are all really thirsty for. And I think it's just going back to our humanity and embracing that, because, I will do a podcast episode, talk all these beautiful concepts and things, and then the next day or that same day, I'm having to embody what I just said. And it becomes even more of a responsibility for me. And it's like a double-edged sword, but I am more than happy to embrace that and then face the truth. And I think kind of what you were saying prior is there's a lot of hiding and avoiding from the truth. And I think we're moving in a direction right now as far as like the human species, the way it's evolving is you cannot hide from the truth any longer. And everything's being exposed. I mean, look at like our government. Everything's being exposed right now. So that same concept, that same algorithm is coming up within ourselves. And we're no longer in a place where we can hide from the truth, and we have to face the truth. And so hopefully that's a good part of the conversation. I broke down everything you said because there's so much.
And can I say a couple things? Because I think
you're
bringing up something called training age, I'd like to explain. Healthy mentors and elders, initiation, So training age in sports is how long have you been training and competing in that sport? And you're a rookie, even with 2 or 5 years. If you just start learning tennis now, you shouldn't be teaching tennis in 2 or 5 years, most likely. So there's an analogy that, there's a number of analogies I use, but one is modified by a friend of mine, Chaplain Jared Altick out of Kansas City. Somebody's never been to the ocean. They get caught up in a riptide on vacation, and the lifeguards have to save them. As soon as they get to shore, and they have a lifeguard on each side holding them up, they're like, dude, that was cool as shit. I want to be a lifeguard. And they go get certified and being a lifeguard in 6 months or a year. And then they write the book about being a lifeguard. And then they're selling their speaking and coaching packages. But me, like, I lived in Manhattan Beach for 14 years. I want the dude that grew up doing junior guards, swam in high school, swam at a D1 college, and then became a lifeguard or a corporate America guy and kept coaching swimming and has been training it for 20 or 30 years. You don't know what you don't know 2 to 5 years into the journey. And a lot of us are treating mental health and wellness and like psychedelics, TRT, SGB, EMDR. There's people out there, mental health professionals, peer support. This is the answer. I haven't heard your story, but I can erase all your trauma if you just do EMDR, you just do psychedelics, or you do 10 therapy sessions with me, or do this 30-day rehab. And I've worked at a rehab for cops and firefighters, and I talked to lots of cops, firefighters, vets, ex-athletes that are now corporate America, and they hear the Navy SEAL or they hear the entrepreneur that did this, took care of their shit. So they think it's like a one and done. And like, there's no one size fits all. We're in different stages of our journey, and the journey never ends. Like, you can take TRT, but if you don't address sleep hygiene, stress, nutrition, are you overtraining or not training enough? If you want to have big bench and abs, like, you're going to have to work hard with the TRT, and you don't hit your 315 bench and then quit working out and maintain it. You can't trip your balls on psychedelics and do no other interior work and maintain that level of consciousness and continue doing the integration for the healing. But when you're hurting really bad and you're desperate for relief, especially from trauma, it sounds really good if you get the SGB shot, if you're familiar with that, or there's people saying I can do 5 EMDR sessions and you can dump all your trauma. And people then put all their eggs in that basket. I'm going to go do this one thing in the mental health and wellness world and not have to do any work on my own. And I just had a story. I used to run retreats off Orcas Island for Seattle PD, FD, LAPD. And I had a number of friends of mine, psychologists, theology professor. And there was a Manhattan Beach firefighter retired that I'm super close to. And after the first year, we're in the plane ride back. I'm going to condense the story. He's like, I'm going to make a PowerPoint. I'm going to teach the firehouse. I'm going to tell my wife and daughters all this stuff I learned on this retreat. And we had this long conversation. We got off the plane. The lady in front of us stopped us in the hallway and said, I got to tell you guys, I've never heard 2 men talk like that. I was crying because we're having this serious conversation about emotions and dealing with our adversity. And the next year on the flight out, he shows me a folder that says WOYOSF. And he's like, I've been working on what you taught me last year. WOYOSF. I don't know what that means. That must have been Dr. Becknell or Dr. Stephanie or Father Jim. He goes, no, last year on the plane when I told you I was coming back and going to teach the firehouse my family, you were like, hold up, bro. Work on your own shit first. Live this stuff out. Then guys at the firehouse, the wife and kids will be like, something's different. I don't want to start doing keto or carnivore or CrossFit or jujitsu just because you started 6 months ago and you're evangelizing everybody. I don't want your religion that you just started until I see it showing up in your life, and even through hard times as well. And if you can move towards when suffering and success make you both more grateful and more humble. And a lot of times we don't know what we don't know because a lot of this shit is unconscious. And by the nature of being unconscious, we're not aware that we're carrying it. So there's a lot of things you can do to cultivate consciousness, but ultimately we need mentors and elders. And sometimes they will be therapists, chaplains, clergy, spiritual directors, or just some kind of OG firefighter that's done his shit that can hold a mirror up to you over time with love, not shame and guilt, and say, hey, maybe these are some things I'm seeing that you might have to work on. And we're all going to be working on things for the rest of our life. Psychedelics and TRT do work, but with all these other things going on, and you can't maintain the benefits unless you keep, watering and tilling the garden and pulling the weeds out.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, dude, you're saying all the best things, and it's hard to break these things down because like it's so much to ingest. So the only way I would be able to kind of break down what you're talking about too is, you ever heard of like the default mode network?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then we also have something called an inner matrix. And so like in the default mode network, it's like, it's the inner voice, the inner narrator of our world. Like all the things like, hey, what did that person think of me? Or, you know, who am I? Though that's the inner voice, that inner narrator is kind of the projector. And then the inner matrix is a bit deeper. It's like the actual projection on the screen. It's actual movie going on. Mm-hmm. And so within those constructs, right, in the inside of the inner matrix, you have these conditional beliefs, you have these emotional patterns, you have these cultural beliefs, you have these cultural conditioning, you have the conditioning from your job, and all these things that are patterns or ruts that are constantly moving and completely ingrained. And then the default mode network will now make sure we'll validate those things. So I think there's a lot of great information out there, but there's not been like a condensed context on how to approach it. And so the way I've seen that's the body's, I guess, programming is the way it's operating off this computer system. And so our goal is to take an operating system that is operating, such as a conditioned belief, right? Or even like a cultural belief. And our goal is to take that operating system, replace it with a new operating system, and let the neurology move from there. Now, that seems really complex, but really it starts with your thoughts. It starts with your responses, your reactions. And that's where someone can do some type of inner work around that. Now, when someone is individually doing inner work around remolding, rewiring the map per se, or the web that's been expanded over since birth, right? That person reconstructs their entire being. And that's how that the best qualities of you, and I'm saying qualities like compassion, nourishment, love, and those are qualities that are limitless. So when someone's instilling qualities in their life, those qualities will now emit themselves in an effortless way. Now, the thing about this is we talk about largely about the ego and how it intertwines with these things, but the ego is just trying to reinvent all of these qualities, all of these conditions, all of these things that are all connected within this giant web. And it's trying to validate those things because it's trying to feel safe. It's trying to feel like it's somewhat valuable. And it's always looking and constantly doing that in everyday life in real time. So our goal is to see, well, why do I do certain things? So you start asking questions about how I can reconstruct these things. And I think if each individual person starts to see it like this, it's actually pretty easy after you start moving these constructs around, the dogmatic doctrines and all these things we've been raised with that we do unconsciously. And the goal is to bring anything that's unconscious to the conscious level so it can be viewed in real life. And through that time, I think when someone does take this work to do this, and a therapist could look at this and be like, holy shit, that's what I went to school for. And like, but they don't know how to really like give it to someone as far as like, this is the roadmap. But when you're doing that, I think it's, you can take all of the tools and use them appropriately, just like the spinal ganglia block, right? Or even psychedelics, or even, traditional EMDR therapy. Like all these things are great tools, but the hard thing has been application in everyday life when people are met with circumstances, conflict at work, conflict at home, because that's where the real work is. That's how we see who we really are, or at least what these patterns are doing secretly underneath the surface. So, what do you think about those two concepts? I think they're really great to talk about.
I want to bring up a couple things. At the end, we'll talk about loyal soldiers. Up front, I want to give a resource for anybody listening that didn't understand what John said about default mode network. If you're online, which I wish we were not online so much, Robin Carhart Harris is an easy guy to follow. That's a researcher on all this. Are you familiar with him?
Oh, I never heard of him.
Definitely follow him online, and he'll be in documentaries. He's one of the leading researchers in psychedelics.
Robert Carhart. I'll look it up. Keep talking.
Robin Carhart Harris. So he'll explain all this. I'll jump to saying what loyal soldiers is. Bill Plotkins is a great author and a Vision Quest leader for 40 years. Native American desert type retreats that explains our loyal soldiers are patterns or behaviors that you're talking about that helped us survive or thrive early in life, but now they're the obstacle to further growth, but they're unconscious. And for the high warrior archetype, you firefighters, cops, first responders, ex-athletes, corporate America, like you want to solve everything with willpower, work ethic, and intelligence. Later in life, when your wife has breast cancer, a child has autism, or mom gets Alzheimer's diagnosis and you're the caretaker, you can't outwork this problem and solve it that way. There has to be surrender to uncertainty and mystery. These operating systems you're talking about are unconscious, so we're often not going to see them on our own. And the first thing we have to do, very generically speaking, to be aware of our unconscious patterns is take our foot off the gas. So if you're looking at HRV, if you wear an Oura ring, HeartMath is a great company to get a more accurate HRV reading. And they will teach you self-regulation, nervous system regulation, breath work, meditation, yoga. There's a lot of things we can do to regulate our nervous system. But if you're on the 405 going 100 miles per hour, like nobody can pop the hood and run a diagnostics. So you got to take your foot off the gas, tap the brakes, pull into a driveway or garage and turn the car off, let it cool down and let somebody pop the hood. You got to calm down your physiology to be in touch with your psychology, which generically speaking, your thoughts and your feelings, your head and your heart. How many people are really in touch with what's going on in their head and their heart? They're not. Phone calls, text messages, work, adrenaline, throw a chew in, food, energy drink, sex, toys, adrenaline, rock and roll, whatever it is. We're staying so busy. We're not aware of things going on. And that's when people try to start meditating. They're like, I can't, I'm thinking of a million things. No, that shit is always going on in your head. You took your foot off the gas and you took some time in silence, nature, fasting from technology. And now you're like, oh shit, it's overwhelming. So let me go compartmentalize, self-medicate, put the foot on the gas again. So calm down your physiology and then start recognizing your thoughts and feelings. And then if we define spirituality, there's a definition I use, only after you've calmed down your physiology to get in touch with your psychology, your head and your heart. And it's really hard to differentiate thoughts and feelings. Even if you've been doing this work for a long time, and it never ends, because there's going to be something that comes up that overwhelms your current level of coping skills. That's the only way we grow. Before you can reflect on what are my values, what's my mission, what's my North Star, what's the lighthouse, and am I living out those values in my everyday interactions? And there's all the world's religious traditions and some orientations of psychology, especially depth psychology, which, by the way, most of our modern therapists, especially at the master's level, are not getting trained in psychoanalytic or psychodynamic. And those are the orientations that look at this stuff, the unconscious stuff that we're talking about. And it takes longer in therapy if you do that, because it's like a lot of the research says, hey, insurance will pay for 10 or 20 sessions. How can we reduce the symptoms? We don't want to crack open what dad did to you. Dad never came to your games. Dad never hugged you, never said he loved you. Father hunger, father wound. That's a whole other issue that ties into initiations, and where men are seeking external validation because they didn't get it from dad or another coach or teacher or grandpa. And our culture doesn't do initiations anymore. But I threw a lot of shit out there. Is any of this making sense, or am I making it more confusing?
Yeah, you're speaking like my language, as far as like the nervous system. A lot of people don't even understand the value in nervous system regulation. And most of us they're living this life of sex, drug, rock and roll, dopamine responses. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I go to work and that's what I do. And so the goal is to slow down. That's really what we want to do, is slow down so you can articulate your thoughts, articulate where that thought came from. Is it coming from an old memory? Is it coming from a conditioned response? So in order for you to kind of work around what's showing up in your life, what's running your life at an unconscious level, and your behaviors that show up with your kids, which will be passed down to them.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's, I think when I always say that, then people are like, okay, I want to change because I don't want my stuff being a burden to my own children. Yes. However, we will never be able to not make an impact on our kids in a negative way. It's always going to happen. We're going to have these little things slip through the cracks, and that's okay. Our goal is to do as much as we can to decrease our level of burdens we can put upon our children. And I would think that's been a big motivator for most people, right? They're like, oh my God, like epigenetics, like everything I do is going to pass down to my children. Yeah, but the good qualities will also pass down to your children. So I think it's not a polarized thing, the stuff we're kind of speaking on. There's when we start increasing polarized thinking, now you're going to think what's good and bad. And then now you're going to oscillate between how I think is good and bad. Now that you're stuck in another rut.
Judgment and inner criticism running wild.
I was just talking to Sean, and I was saying, hey man, if someone wrote a book, we always remember like a thicker book of all the criticisms, and then it's a smaller book of all the things we motivate ourselves with. So why is it that we are adept to this criticism, this self-masochistic way we live our lives? And I think it's our willingness to want to improve and also optimize our life and try to fix things. And so that, I think, is one operating system in itself, because we're conditioned as a firefighter, as a police officer, for threat detection. We're conditioned to fix things. We're always analyzing and looking at every single little problem in order for us to fix it, to value ourselves. So why is that the case? Well, first of all, in order for you to survive and you're looking for things, that's designed so you can go home safe to your family. But that doesn't work in regular day life. No one gives a shit whether you can, pull out a gun and then kill someone who's also armed, or if you're at a fire and you're trying to look at all the structure inside of a building that's going to keep itself when there's a fire inside that building. So what we have to do is, when you start slowing down, you start seeing these things, you start having these realizations, and you're like, wow, day by day, you can pick apart these things so they don't run your life. And I think the awareness is really the key here. And it takes a lot of that slowing down to actually have awareness in a sense,
Can I throw out some practical awareness things that cops and firefighters should do? And don't wait for your agency to do this, even though I wish all our agencies really cared about our mental health and wellness. So if you have a PPO plan, you're getting one free annual preventative wellness visit a year. You're going to have to do your homework, find the right doctor. And if you can afford a functional and integrative doctor, do this as early in your career as possible, not until after you're right a bang, because your shit's not going to look good. Blood labs, blood sugar, inflammation, all your hormones. So dudes are always, whether it's peer support or checking in on your bros after a hard call, are you good? Yeah, man, I'm good. So if I'm doing my blood work once a year, my blood sugar, my hormones and inflammation are altered by stress. So keeping tabs on that. Get a sleep study done. A lot of people have jacked up sleep. Get an Oura ring. It'll tell you every day, like during the day, am I in restored, relaxed, engaged, or stressed? You might say, I've been good all day. I'm good. Then I look at my ring. Now, you can't let the data run your life, but shit, I'm unaware that I was running hot, stressed for 6 hours. So even if I went to therapy today, if the gas pedal's on the floor, I'm not in touch with my head or heart. Or if I'm talking to a clergy or an elder or whatever. Sleep study, blood work, get yourself an Oura ring. EEG, neurofeedback, measures your brain waves. And there's something called alpha theta training, where you're essentially closing your eyes and they'll do a guided meditation, and they can see if you can even process unconscious material. So we might say we're good and I'm managing all my shit. My blood work looks like shit. My HRV every day is not looking good. Sleep study came back bad. And if once a year or more often, if I can afford it, I go do some alpha theta training, which normally you don't jump into alpha theta. They do a brain map. We can look at your brain waves and see if you're really dealing with what's a couple layers down. So that's calming down the physiology, and you can pay attention to that on your own, because you might be feeling good. And then 3 years from now, even if it's the blood work's really off, but I still feel the same. I look the same. I'm not getting chubby, but something's off. So the check engine light has come on as you use these biometrics and labs, and you can, let's pop the hood. But what do cops, firefighters, and high performance people do? Check engine light comes on, piece of black electrical tape, put it over the check engine light, mash the gas pedal more. And that could be working more, trying harder, or it could be chew, booze, energy drinks, sleeping with somebody I shouldn't sleep with, buying toys, porn, gambling, name it. There's 100 different things that we do to avoid the deeper shit. So there are ways that we can start looking at our physiology to see if we're even capable of tapping into what's going on unconsciously.
Yeah. Have you heard of Bud's Odyssey? You had to have heard of Bud's Odyssey.
I have. They're neurofeedback, right?
Yeah. Well, so Bud's Odyssey is like it's a nonprofit that sends you over to do neurofeedback is one of the things. But if you were a veteran or a firefighter or police officer, they will do everything for free. And I've sent a lot of people to Bud's Odyssey programs, but they're mainly designed around brain trauma. And so their association is to see what your brain scans look like. And so they do all the things you're talking about at no cost.
But it's right a bang reactive for the most part.
Yes,
right?
100%. And they also do hyperbaric chamber therapy.
Awesome.
So it's about a $10,000 program that's for free. If anyone's ever heard of it, I've talked about it before because I've been through their program.
Okay.
And amazing work. So, but it does also do organic acid tests. So you're going to see your levels with your gut biome, because we're talking about mind-heart connection, but there's also a mind-brain connection with your gut.
Nutrition matters big time.
Because there's also the gut-brain axis, which is really like there's neurons in the gut that are associated with how you think and how you behave. And so a lot of people will have infections in their gut, staph infections, C. diff. All these things are not, sometimes your behaviors are associated with those infections, parasites. And so if you do these organic acid tests with Bud's Odyssey as well, you get to see candida overgrowth through the body. That's a marker for high inflammation. That's why you feel in pain most of the time, or you can't think, brain fog. So these, we're looking at a multi-system, a multi-dimensional viewpoint with how we treat the body, how we treat the mind, how we treat the spirit. And what's interesting enough, that gut-brain axis, runs right through the middle of it, the vagus nerve. So if you have high inflammatory markers through the gut biome, a leaky gut or whatever it is, your vagus nerve has a hard time bogging down into a rest and digest state. So like these things are not new, but we just barely have been able to use them. And the shitty part about it is most of your Western medical primary care physicians will never talk about this stuff, which is
they don't know
which is a problem.
They're not teaching this in medical school,
which is kind of sad, don't you believe?
Well, the insurance companies aren't going to pay for a doctor. That's why I moved to LA, to be honest. I was a cop in Fairfax County, Virginia, DC. Long medical nightmare story. And I had a psychiatrist out there that 20 years ago had a nutritionist for the gut-brain connection, meditation, yoga, Reiki, and massage in her psychiatry office. So if you're a cop or firefighter in the DC area, Dr. Colleen Blanchfield was doing this stuff 20 years ago. She told me to move to LA because she's like, Matt, there's more functional and integrative doctors out there that look at all these things like she does. This is how you need to try to get recovered from all the stuff that happened to me. And if you are in LA, my doctor, one of my doctors, Dr. Robert Krokmel, MDintegrative.com, he is cheaper than going to a men's clinic. Let's say you do need TRT. He's going to address everything first. You shouldn't just jump on TRT, which dudes do. They don't address the underlying issues, but he knows all this gut-brain connection and the nervous system connection stuff. So you want to look at those things. And I'll throw this out there, especially in LA, there's a guy, Chris Collins, that works for a company, Opt Health. Even if you don't want to be on hormones, and I'm not advocating getting on hormones because I think it's like psychedelics. Are you going to do all the work for a year to see if you really need hormones, or are you going to put your training wheels on before you go on a free psychedelic retreat so you can maximize these experiences? Opt Health has a deal that for a first responder or vet, they and their spouse for $100 can get your initial labs and then have an hour consult with a functional or integrative, more holistic doctor. Now I'm telling you, they're going to say, hey, we can give you hormones, we can give you supplements, we can give you peptides. You can say no to that. But even if you're like, I don't know how to find the doctor, I don't want to use my PPO, Opt Health for $100, you and your partner can get your labs and at least a 1 hour consult to start looking at these types of things.
Yeah, it's great. I've been involved with so many different programs, and people have told me a lot about different programs, but you've come up with a lot of great shit, man. I think it's really cool because I think when we're in pain or we're hurting, that leads us on this path of what we call healing, right? And I love how you brought up the archetype of the wounded warrior, because we all who are kind of on this other side of that wall of crisis, we go on down this path, and I think it comes a point where we have to stop identifying with that part of us And because when we start identifying with it, then it kind of still runs the show. And that's why I mentioned to you earlier, the ego is really sneaky. So it now attaches itself to another identity. And now that identity is now creating these ideas where you're just like, oh, I need more, I need this. And now even though these things are good things, you've now kind of dug yourself another hole of something you're digging more, which has a bottomless pit to it. So a wounded warrior is someone who, by all means, it's a necessary process, but I think it's sometimes helpful, and also it's like a double-edged sword, right? But it's cool when we work through this wounded warrior program of our own minds, our own psychology, because we run across so many cool people, and we run across people who actually know what the hell they're talking about. You know what I mean? So there's some really good value in it. And I know a lot of great people who have become good friends now because I was just a wounded warrior, just kind of walking because I didn't know what to do. Workers' comp wasn't working for me. And many other doctor didn't know what they were doing as far as like traumatic brain injury, because that's what I had dealt with. And no one had an answer for me, so I took I didn't take no for an answer. And I went through this process through burning fire and incineration phase of my life, where people gravitated towards me with that intention of wanting to heal. Now it's beautiful because I'm a living embodiment of someone who's come across its own incineration phase or its own healing journey. And now I have all the tools that I can help someone with traumatic brain injury, that they had no clue had existed. So it's a really wonderful phase in your life. And so we always tend to gravitate towards these archetypes, and it's kind of cool how we don't have to identify with them, but we could also like switch and oscillate between these archetypes,
Living out primarily through one archetype will kill you. And the warrior archetype is really hard to get out of the driver's seat. Yeah. And the one archetype we're missing a lot of is the lover archetype. That's why I do intentionally wear the purple Love Heals shirt with presenting the cops and veterans like, what dude is this guy gay? We're not allowed to talk about love. But we can't give away that which we do not possess for ourselves. And we can only see others as deeply as we see ourselves. And that takes a lot of work. But at some point in life, we usually look back and say, what did my mom and dad didn't give me? When I'm on retreats, whether it's first responders, veterans, or 70-year-old men at a men's work retreat, something comes up about mom and dad almost all the time. 100%. And I've known so many guys, either through their addiction and then in rehab, they detox and sober up, or I've been around guys that do psychedelics, and the first thing that they say when they come out of it is, holy shit, I don't spend time with my kids and I treat my wife like shit. And it's like, wow, it took sobering up from an addiction to realize that. It took like blasting your balls off on psychedelics to realize it. Like that's the lover archetype. But so the contemplative spiritual traditions, depth psychology, all the nervous system regulation people, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, heart math, those are people that are not high warrior archetype. Neither are a lot of the men's groups that teach this stuff. So when you want to go to Buddhist meditation, you want to go to yoga, you want to go to a Native American vision quest. I've lived in these worlds for 30 years, and I'm the only guy's guy. But I can listen to them talk woo-woo. I can listen to them these days like rip on Trump. But I just know that all the cops, the firefighters, my blue-collar friends, the ex-team guys, they're going to be like, fuck this shit. These people don't understand what it's like to run the calls I do as a firefighter or a cop. Right. I've been to war, but it's like, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. So where are the elder warriors that are demonstrating a healthy warrior archetype that's supporting the lover archetype and is moving towards the king archetype? And with each of these things, a healthy warrior and a lover and the king, we've taken care of our self-worth and our self-love enough that now we can give it away and affirm others. And we're not pointing to ourselves as the source of all knowledge and enlightenment. And in our warrior world right now, a lot of the people that, whether it's breath work or the SGB or I wrote the book, whatever the solution is, it's a high warrior archetype guy that started the healing journey, but then keeps pointing to himself as now I have the answers for you, versus I've listened to you. You say, here's this book, here's this author, here's this friend, here's this mentor. See, that's somebody that has a healthier recognition and awareness of initiation, that I'm not the end of the line here. And the more I learn, the less I realize I know. But the warrior wants to and our influencer world wants to say like, I'm confident 100% of the time I have all the answers. And that's a red flag. And it could be completely unconscious. They could have the best of intentions. That's why they're doing peer support or they're a therapist now, but they're unconscious of how they're pushing like the one size fits all. And they're the end of enlightenment, not, hey, I'm just pointing, here's the authors, the books, the mentors, the elders, the other 30 resources that I think you should look into. And I'm here to support you with my role as well. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, and most of my mentors that I have, who are my greatest teachers, they don't even have a social media account. They're all underground, and all the work they do has just been cultivated over a lifetime. And so a lot of the things I've used have been able to teach from all these great teachers of mine who have rescued me or showed me the way to rescue myself from my own disarray, my own lies. And I think that's the biggest question I ask myself is like, how do I lie to myself? And that really led me down a true spiritual path where I had to really find the grief in that, or the just anger in that because of what I do to myself. And I think it comes to a point where we have to make a decision where it's intolerable to self-massacrate, to punish yourself or judge yourself, because those things are really what run a life into destruction. And I think over time, after you work through all the grief and after you work through all those emotions, like even that in itself was an attachment. It became an addiction because what I realized the deeper addiction was an addiction to certainty, which is I always look to certainize my life through a lack of trust. And it's just this false scaffolding that was never safe in the first place. So I would do everything trying to validate that constantly, but it didn't work. So I had to go deep and find out like, hey, why do I do that in the first place? Number one. And then the thing is like, what are the tools I can use to replace that or to transform it? Because in the end, we can't deny parts of ourselves that have been lost or forgotten. We have to acknowledge them and integrate them, because we're never really broken or fragmented. We're already whole. We just have to remove the false constructs, the false illusions first, and then we can come to that realization later down the road. It takes a lot of time and effort, but
that's why it's not popular. Like the influencers that are online selling their books and they're speaking
all the answers.
Yeah, it's not easy. So we want a fast food menu. It's delicious. It's quick. It's not that expensive. But the nutritional value of a Big Mac compared to a grass-fed, finished, pasture-raised ribeye steak, it's not even comparable. But people don't know about factory farming versus grass-fed. And I'm using an analogy here. But that steak's going to cost more because the cow was raised longer. It wasn't on steroids in its own feces getting antibiotics, where we made it really big with junk food and steroids, and then we sell it. This one lived 2 or 3 times as long. Same with chickens too. If you look into how we raise chickens, you want something that naturally aged, wasn't given junk food or drugs, and it's going to have more nutritional value, but you're going to pay more for it. It's going to take longer to season, put the grill on, warm up the grill, and you're going to slow cook that bad boy. But the nutrition's a lot more dense. And when people are hurting or starving, I want relief now. But that's just going to be temporary if the nutritional value's not that good.
I totally agree. I am curious about your personal journey. What was like the most like a pivot point in your journey of healing that really switched things for you?
So this is where maybe my story is different, and I try to talk. I've always been a little bit either of maybe a nerd or like wanting to be the best at sports, and then wanting to be the best at being a cop or at a coach, and then wanting to attack whatever the healing when adversity came up. But I started working out hard in 6th grade. My dad got me a jump rope, a Walkman with Force Recon, Jody, and Airborne Ranger, ankle weights. So I'm jumping rope, running in the ankle weights, push-ups, sit-ups. In 7th grade, he got me a weight set. He got permission for me to lift with the high school football team, lifting and running in middle school with the high school football team. Sent me to high school baseball camps when I was in middle school. Say, hey, you can compete the kids your age fair enough. You're not going to get better unless you level up. In high school, because of football, I loved it so much. I got into meditation and journaling on and off. Because of hunting with my dad, I spent a lot of time in nature. I didn't realize the connection to spirituality back then, because when you're growing up in a church, they don't talk about the contemplative or mystical traditions, that's a whole rabbit hole in itself. That meditation and reflective prayer and nervous system regulation are part of all the world's religious traditions. Mm-hmm. They are. People just aren't aware of it. It's not about my 10 steps to enlightenment or to see the white bearded guy in the sky and the day I physically die and my ticket to heaven is more correct. Those are long stories too. But I have a good father. The father hunger, father wound, I don't have. And I could write a book about my father and my relationship with him, including before we started recording. 81 years old, we just went on a bear hunt to Canada. My dad's still rocking it, you know. I've had a lot of success in sports and academics and friendships and relationships and mentors and elders. And guess what? When hard shit happens, even if you're eating strict and working out and meditating and journaling and going to therapy and going to something called spiritual direction that I wish more people were aware of, life is still really fucking hard. Mm. There's no way to get an easy pass. And so can you start training yourself now? Like, I want to know, like, how to work hard during the crisis. I don't want to figure out how to eat strict, meditate, journal, or share my feelings for the first time in the middle of a divorce or another dead kid call that made my misery cup overflow. So can you start training yourself to be vulnerable, to be in touch with yourself before the shit hits the fan? Because even if you're doing a lot of things right, not saying I did everything perfect, I've had a support system my whole life that other people don't. When I was going through my medical shit, I asked the PD, like, I want to see a therapist, no stigma. And then I had to fight for that because work comp's trying to say, maybe we're not responsible for this, right? I had no stigma attached, and I've been through so many different dark times in my life. So, you know, if you look back on your life as kind of a psychological, spiritual autobiography, and you have to do this, at least in my spiritual direction schools, and one of them was attached to a master's at LMU in pastoral theology. Generically speaking, look at the periods of your life where there's been great suffering or great love, and what lessons did you learn? And if you didn't learn the lessons, that's often where the bitterness and the unfinished work with the loyal soldiers is, and the patterns that you're not aware of. What is the lesson in this so I can integrate it into my story? And so I had a lot of different things in my life. Like ninth grade, I lived on my own in an apartment in Western Pennsylvania because my dad switched jobs. I had a sister that was going to be a senior in Ohio that was struggling. And I think somebody, like a counselor, said, man, if you move her senior year, she's going to be even worse. And my dad's like, Matt, I know you want to play college football. Looking further down the road than I can see, I want to stay with my childhood buddies in Ohio. He's like, ninth grade, start of high school. If you want to make a run at a college scholarship, the new school system needs to figure out who you are now, not your sophomore year. So he wasn't going to buy two houses. He lived with his dad in a different town and had to get me an apartment in the town he knew he would buy a house when my mom and sisters came. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So in ninth grade, I'm living on my own, cooking my own food, taking care of myself. And my dad expected me to do good in school, National Honor Society. I made varsity baseball as a freshman on a state championship team. I'm not saying it was easy. I was bitching the whole time to my dad. I want to be in Ohio with my buddies. And then what I learned, an important lesson back then, was I was kind of treated like a hero. Beaver County, Pennsylvania is famous for sports. And my sophomore year, I started both ways varsity on football, 48-minute man, every special team. So like, wow, everybody, not saying that I wasn't a good kid, but everybody loved me a lot without knowing me deeply because I was really good at football and baseball and good in school. And my buddies from Ohio that I grew up with, kind of more suburbia, rural, Hartford, Uniontown, Ohio, they'd come watch me play varsity sports in PA and be like, dude, this town treats you like Elvis. You're just another punk from Westview. Our neighborhood was Westview. And I realized they loved me for who I was, not for my performance, not for my success. So that was an early lesson that I learned that a lot of us don't, and especially if we don't have that father or another elder male nourishing and affirming us for whatever our true self is. Because ultimately, we are all precious and loved, and it shouldn't be because you're a badass firefighter or you make a ton of arrests as a cop, whatever performance metrics there are in your world. But a lot of that is placed on us by society and sometimes by our parents. It's what you do is what your value is in love, and that's not true. So if it makes sense, even in 9th grade, I learned that lesson that my buddies that I grew up with love me for who I am. They could care less about what my grades are or how good I'm in sports. And I'm still friends with those guys to this day. And I left in 9th grade, and I'm texting my childhood Ohio neighbors every day. So I had real community, real friends that saw the true self for who I was and valued it, and a father as well that demanded and expected the best from me in sports and school, but more character and integrity. And he was nourishing as much as he was hard on me. So that was like first lesson. My senior year of high school, I broke my hand, fractured my back, and tore ligaments in my ankle. All the big time D1 schools dropped me. I was, like, this sucks. But West Point, Annapolis, Air Force Academy, Coast Guard Academy, I got appointments, which is a pain in the ass academically, but I got hooked up because of football, and the Patriot and Ivy League schools wanted me. Looking back, that was better for me than going to a pure football school where I keep the mullet, I probably still keep drinking beer, and I focus on lifting and being a badass football player. I'm not saying I wouldn't have turned out okay. Air Force Academy, shave your head, take away TV, 7 classes a semester, hard as hell. I was the last class to go through SEER, survival, evasion, resistance, escape. So even after your freshman year's over and I lost all this weight because I hated football players and my squad didn't let me eat, so I only got to eat dinner when you were with the football players. Then you go through prisoner of war training. And then when I transferred 2 years later to a civilian school, Colgate University, over Harvard, which upset my dad, but I didn't like my Harvard football trip. I was like, God, these people are pretty immature. So getting all those injuries in high school that led to not playing at a big time D1 school sent me somewhere better to grow up and mature. And then I'm running through different lessons here. At Colgate, I had 21 tackles in 3 quarters the first game of my real senior year. And then the next week in practice, I tore my calf in half. And then they said, you're never going to run again. And there's a longer story to that where I had quit drinking, but I started drinking again, not for fun, but to self-medicate. Looking back, right? I'm like, I used testosterone for a couple weeks. One of my coaches, I'm not blaming the coach, but he's like, Matt, there's things they do at the bigger schools to heal. And then I had never touched drugs. And I'm like, my powerlifting records, my football career, if people find out, they find out I'm using testosterone now, people think I was doing it all along. And so I had a deeper spiritual conversion at around 20 where I had made football my God, is what I realized. And I'm like, what's the real lesson here? How do you really give your life to God? And that's a whole story in itself where I went to a Jewish professor, an evangelical professor, a Catholic professor, and I started reading books on all the world's religions and just asking people, what's faith mean? What's it mean to really give your life to God? And it's beyond rules and dogma and doctrine. It's about the experience of the divine and love and peace and joy and meaning and suffering, which is the contemplative and mystical traditions. I'm covering a lot in a little bit of time. So that was at Colgate, the calf tear. And then later in life, I just made a SWAT team a year or so earlier. I was a strength coach at Georgetown, take-home car, police academy instructor, peer support before peer support was cool. And I got to work police week, which is a big deal because we were right in the DC area. And then I have an injury during SWAT that I get a surgery that I find out I never should have had.
What was the injury?
It was something called an anal fissure from doing squats, and they heal on their own. But a work comp doctor said, you need a surgery. And I thought work comp was like football. Like they want to get me back on the field. You get the bet. No, I didn't know anything about work comp. The doctor clipped my internal sphincter.
Whoa.
And you can't fix that. And then also caused nerve damage. And then the corrective surgeries, I had internal infections. And the approval process for the corrective surgery, the first one was like 8 months or something. 8 months of opiates, antibiotics that killed my flora, but the doctors back then, the regular doctors didn't know that. Why am I getting sick? Why am I getting fat? Even though I'm still eating strict and working out. So multiple corrective surgeries later, I'm permanently incontinent, which is what led to my medical retirement. Right when I'm in my 30s on a major SWAT team, coaching at Georgetown, doing ministry at Georgetown that I loved. And I thought I was just beginning, now that I'm on SWAT and there's all these plans that I had, and like the warrior is over, brother. And thank God I had that really good psychiatrist, Dr. Blanchfield, that was like, listen, you have this healthy balance where you're the guy that doesn't own a TV, that meditates and journals 3 hours a night when you get home from your shift, and then you coach at Georgetown, which is totally different than being a cop in a high crime area. And then you do ministries with evangelicals, even though you're a very contemplative Christian, which is more the meditation type stuff. And she's like, now that you lost all the adrenaline and everything, your brain chemistry is going to be off. You're going to have a really hard time. And she's like, I want you to start watching TV. This is just one example. So I get a TV and I go to Blockbuster back then when you could rent things. And she's like, yeah. What are you watching? I'm like, how to be an Air Force PJ, how to be a Green Beret, how to be a Navy SEAL. There was this Surviving the Cut, I think, was the actual series. It was all the different special ops groups, whatever their pipeline was. And I was talking, there's longer stories where I lived on a summer at a place called Storm Mountain Training Center during my first master's with a former DC SWAT and Green Beret. So I was a forensic science graduate student before I was a cop, running and gunning, rappelling, sniper schools, shooting with special forces dudes, and training with Tony Blauer, who's a world famous martial artist. So here I am going through surgeries where it looks like you're never even going to be a cop again. And I'm watching all this warrior archetype shit, which I didn't understand that language back then. And she's like, Matt, you need to watch comedies. Like, you're going to have to let go of all this hardcore shit. And here I am in therapy and in spiritual direction with a priest that's also a mental health professional that I've been seeing for years, not because I have a crisis, because I'm trying to grow deeper in my spirituality. I have a best friend that's a feminist theologian therapist, Princeton, Yale, Vanderbilt. She has multiple graduate degrees. I have support, and I'm not stigmatizing it, and I'm still fucking things up, to some degree. Warrior. So forced medical retirement from a surgery I find out I never should have had. I would have healed on my own. That overwhelmed my capacity. And then I moved to LA.
Yeah. How did you recover from the pelvic floor?
I didn't.
It's a tough injury to come back. I mean, I had surgery very similar to that, where I had like an abscess like around my pelvic floor area, and the doctor just like cut it out and like sewed me back together, and it was like, all right, you're good. And so that was like a really tough injury to come back up. I mean, your pelvic floor is like the fulcrum of your entire body. Mm-hmm. So everything passes through that area, and it still is tough to do certain things. I've noticed over time it pulls from different areas. So you got to like be really precise on how you manage that,
Until I moved, I was still doing physical therapy 3 days a week this whole time. Before it was cool, Dr. Krokma had me fasting. So 17 years ago, because we had to figure out a way, either I'm wearing diapers and staying home, just leaking, or not, because I also can't feel my rectal tube. There's multiple things that happened during those surgeries that didn't go well. Workers' comp. Like, it is not like getting hurt playing college sports and you're getting good treatment. So he was the one that was like, hey, Matt, you can fast, wake up early. And this is what I do. And that's why I scheduled this a little later. I wake up early, I chug water, I take my supplements, I do organic, freshly roasted espresso beans, and then I try to clear myself out for like 4 or 5 hours. And that's when I may read, meditate, pray, work out, cold plunge while I'm going through. Let's try to empty myself. And then I don't eat all day. And then if I'm hunting with my dad, or when I used to ride in South LA or with Torrance PD, I may not eat for a couple of days because I don't want to have accidents and I want to be able to focus on whatever I'm doing. And I used to eat every 2 to 3 hours, protein shake. I mean, since I was 12 or 13, because positive nitrogen balance, you're going to lose muscle mass. So when the doctor's like, fasting's good for you, autophagy, blah, 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 17 years ago. Now low carb and fasting, intermittent fasting is popular. He was doing it with me, and guess what? I didn't get small. I eat 1 or 2 meals a day, and I stay big for my age, and I don't even train as hard as I used to. So I had to learn how to fast, and now I'm just used to it. So I've gone up to 6 days when I go on silent retreats. If I don't want to miss things, sometimes I just fast for days at a time, and it can be good for you. And it's growing in another area of life. Like I'm jumping around. When I was younger as a cop and a strength coach, I never did more than a 3-day silent retreat. And I would do contemplative Christian, Buddhist, yoga, or just secular mindfulness. But I'm like 3 days without the gym, 3 days without my strict food. Can't do that, still meathead. But then it's like do 5, 8, 10-day retreats. I'm going much deeper into my head and my heart. And okay, so if I don't lift weights for 10 days or have strict food, I'm growing in a much more significant area of my life that I need to do more work. I can jump back into the gym and on my healthy food, and it's not that disastrous. When we're young, and I was going to say this earlier, you brought something up. There's two quotes I'll use. Rigidity is something we use to protect ourselves from uncertainty. It's not black and white, but rigidity allows us to protect ourselves from uncertainty. And that's Dr. Thomas Broad. And then Father Jim Clark says it like this: the people that preach and argue the loudest, whether that's religion, diet, martial arts, they're trying to convince themselves. Because if you have the truth, and especially when it comes to unconditional love, and I'm jumping all over the place here, but if I have the truth about lifting or nutrition, like I want to affirm you where you are instead of like lecture you. That's not going to change you. Why can't I be okay if I'm secure where you are and your diet and your fitness? You bodybuild, I CrossFit. You power lift, I bodybuild. I do judo, you do jujitsu. Why are we arguing about which one's better? Like, this works for you. Like, I'm happy for you. Good for you. So, got a little off track there, but those were a couple other things I wanted to mention. But I've had to go through all this stuff myself. Double down, even when I got better in LA after learn how to fast. I don't eat all day. And I've done 2 master's degrees since being retired. Grad school is usually night class, so I can't eat all day. So, I mean, just do what you got to do, but I don't get skinny. I don't lose my muscle, and just have to adapt and grow and learn to do things that I would never wish upon anybody else to do. And not many people know that about me. Even the cops and the firefighters I used to hang out with. You ask a question, I'll answer it, but I don't tell them because I don't want to be identified as that or them think that. I just want all of us to try to live the best lives we can, given whatever circumstances we have. And if self-disclosure allows another person to connect in some way, that's good, but we don't have to constantly share whatever it is was our, the biggest wounds, if that makes sense. So if my message, to try to come back to it, I'm jumping all over, I do all these things and my life is still hard today. I go to therapy, neurofeedback, psychoanalysis, get body work when I can. Used to do float tanks a lot. I do journaling, dream journaling, meditate, read books, spend time with mentors, work out, spend time in nature. And life is still fucking hard. So I could be an idiot, or these other people have shit figured out that I haven't figured out, leaning on a lot of smart people my whole life and being a pretty disciplined guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it, right? And I think it's sometimes it's our relationship to everything that really is what we have to embrace. Like, what is my relationship to working out? Is it me trying to improve myself? And so I had to reconstruct all of that because I was constantly looking to improve. And our psychology reflects our biology and vice versa, right? And so I think the way I approach things, it's the reverence I have for it. And I think that's one of the key components, because reverence is not like, if we're trying to balance things out, right, from one extreme to the other, you cannot find the middle. It's how we find a relationship to something and how we respond to something. That's balance. And that's how our neurology responds to it as well. So like, we adapt and overcome, but when shit gets hard, that's where we really see like how we've responded, And if I fall short to that, then that's okay. And so I think that's where a lot of people have a hard time, especially men and women in this line of work, because we see mistakes as weakness. We are so hard on ourselves.
Performance, judgment, performance.
It's tough, man. And no, I'm guilty of it. I do it all the time still. And so I'm looking to better myself in just that program alone, because I think that's one of the main issues. And inside of this world we live in, that we're involved in, is how hard we are on ourselves. We're the hardest on ourselves than anyone else. And I think if we can do better at looking at that, just that one small microcosm of a belief system or a condition or a program, we can really make an impact on how we have a relationship to our kids, how we have a relationship to the job, how we have a relationship to how life can respond to us. I think it really even changes like a foundational frequency in how we're operating. And so when we start changing frequency, because whatever we're talking about right now, whether it's different type of religious, viewpoints or our beliefs about things, the only thing that matters is frequency. Like, our frequency is how the world responds around us, which I really loved Dr. Joe Dispenza and his work, because he's really going into that foundational set point of how we change our own frequency, our dynamic frequency. Everything's in flux, and it's our responsibility to gain relationship with that. Because the way the universe responds, the way the quantum field responds, is it's going to adapt to that frequency. So all the things you're going to come across in your life, you're gonna start to attract based off what you're magnetized to. So it's just the way cause and effect works. It's the way the universe speaks. It's the way nature knows things. And I think we've lost touch to the fundamentals of natural law. We've lost touch to the foundation of universal law. And if we can come down to try to understand and articulate as much as we can from what we even know, what the human brain can actually perceive it as, we can start to kind of maneuver past all of the people trying to give you an answer, who have the best answer as an influencer. And I just recently was struggling with that. I was just, my feed on Instagram has been filled with that. So recently, the last few months, I've lost the motivation to try to post anything, because that's all I'm seeing, and I don't want to become that either. Mm-hmm. All I hope for is that someone hears about my own personal experiences or someone else's personal experiences, and they gravitate towards that. I think truly in our innate nature, we're just really thirsty for human connection,
yes,
human experience. And I really think that that's part of the answer, especially with peer support. Once you start getting involved with that, you start to see our humanity just grow and start to evolve and start to just enter, and it starts healing these collective wounds. And I think that's really the biggest step towards what we can find as what we see as success with this crisis we deal with. But I think that over time, our own stuff gets dumped into this process of healing this collective wound. So I think that if we are careful with not just letting our own stuff dump out onto how we approach healing, or how we approach misdiagnosing or even diagnosing, because we're just putting everything in a box. I just don't think that's how it works.
Man, there's a number of things. I wish I had a notebook so I could take notes while you're talking. A couple quotes I always use. If you don't heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people that did not cut you. Pain that is not transformed is transmitted. That's Richard Rohr. And so whatever you don't deal with from childhood or the calls you're running, usually you're going to spill it out on your family, your partner, your kids. That's one thing. Joe Dispenza, part of his research is using heart math, HRV, and the EEG brainwaves I told you about to show what meditation can do as far as calming down your physiology and allowing you to access more of your thoughts and your feelings. And that's even the feelings in your body, how in touch you are with your body. The fact that you talk about nature so much, if you haven't read Bill Plotkin's yet, you should definitely read Bill Plotkin's. And you're also touching on something else. A truth is a truth is a truth. And a lot of orientations of psychology or spirituality just have different vernacular or vocabulary for it. And people often get tribal or dualistic, which is black and white around my group's better than yours. But there's a lot smarter people than me in psychology and spirituality that the more you individuate or grow up, you stop seeing how you differentiate. You're a firefighter. I was a cop, so we're supposed to be breaking balls. You're a Republican. Let's say I'm a Democrat. We can't be on the same team. The more you grow up psychologically and spiritually, especially as a cop or a firefighter, because you see so much shit, you're immersed in the suffering of humanity. Can you start viewing things as what you have that's in common with the whole human experience, not how you differentiate? So that's non-dualistic thinking or non-dualistic living. And that's what all the traditions of meditation or contemplative prayer are supposed to help people grow in. But we live in this society where that's why in social media, short feed, why am I right? Why are you wrong? Who's in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong? And this is the team I'm on. But this is mostly happening unconsciously. Even on Nextdoor in the neighborhoods, people pick a topic and then go balls out like I'm on this side, you're on this side, instead of building bridges. And this is a part of the culture we're in with social media and technology.
Yeah, I did want you to break down in your own viewpoint, your own words, because heart math and heart-mind connection is such a valuable core component on how a human being operates. So please explain that. And then you went into non-dualism a bit swiftly,
okay,
which I think is it's a concept most people have never heard of or understood. And I think those are very great building blocks on someone's psychology, how someone has a relationship with self, how someone has a relationship with the world around them, the worldview, and how it affects their internal world. So if you mind just explaining those things, so I've explained them before, but it's not many people mention those things.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to where I'm like, God dang, I want to send people, cops, firefighter, vets, ex-Ivy League and Patriot League athletes that are now, tip of the spear in corporate America or law, that went to the best business schools and law schools in the country. And now they're going through divorces or parents dying or co-parenting with an ex-wife, and they can't figure it out with willpower or work ethic or intelligence. And then all of the resources that I've learned from over 30 years are, quote, often liberal or soft. And so they're like, screw that. So I'll sign up for the ex-Navy SEAL that has you do burpees before you meditate, and then you cold plunge, and then you put it online. Like, hey, this is okay if you're younger, but if you're like older and you're doing the deeper journey and you're still showing everybody your meal prep and your workout and your cold plunge, that's external validation. That's not intrinsic lifestyle habits you've developed that you don't have to prove to anybody. And this ties into initiation and love. Like, if you've been loved, you really need to get your quote love from the likes and the attention. So that's the problem. There's not a lot of warrior archetype people that are academics in these different areas of theology, spirituality, or psychology. And even if there's people that have valuable information, and this is not me speaking, if any therapist is listening to this is sleeved up cops, firefighters, and ex-special ops guys. A lot of the times they're just flat out telling me the person that came to talk about PTSD was some frumpy middle-aged woman that's never worked out or been punched in the face or pulled a gun on somebody. So she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about, or I'm not going to trust her to see me for who I am. And I'm not saying that's right, but that's a lot of the perception. So who are the quote warriors teaching these things? And hopefully before you have to have a TBI or another divorce, or there's more collateral damage done before you have emotional sobriety and you want to work on these things. So generically speaking, heart math is heart rate variability research that ties in like our emotions, where we don't judge things. It's not performance. It's not good or bad. There's different emotions and different life experiences we have. And depending on how we're interpreting or living through them, it could be draining our battery and our hormones or recharging them. So our heart rate variability is connected to our autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is gas. Parasympathetic is brake, and it has to be trained. It's not just sitting down, throwing a chew in and drinking a beer after your shift. Okay.
I love how you always say that.
Well, what do a lot of cops, firefighters, and so
exactly.
So you got to train the parasympathetic nervous system to calm down your physiology, to be in touch with your head and your heart, your thoughts and your feelings, and reflect on it. So heart math does have they'll say, I shouldn't use this word, and I've been trained by them, but they have different forms of meditation. Like one of them obviously is derived from loving kindness and Buddhism, which is a good thing if you're familiar with it. But they have scientifically validated forms of breath work, self-regulation, tapping the brakes, training the parasympathetic nervous system, and you can record it. It's objective data. So you can see, am I getting better at calming myself down and being grounded? And then I can do my work, my inner work. So HeartMath has great research. Patrick Nardulli, if you're a police or fireman or fire department, police department, he's one of their senior instructors. He's a veteran, and he taught this stuff in the Navy for years with the top sleep scientists and psychiatrists of the Navy. So Patrick Nardulli is the dude for HeartMath, in my opinion, and I can get you in touch with him if anybody wanted that. If you wanted, he could break it down and he could hook you up. He could show you, like, right now in real time how you're doing, and then walk you through some imagery and breath work and see how you can calm your nervous system down. You can activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So is that a good enough?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to it. You know, you're mentioning heartmath.org, which is it's an organization where there's a ton of stuff you can look through and siphon through and see the science behind our human heart and mind connection.
I can give you a couple examples, maybe.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that that in our heart there's neurons in there. There's over 40,000, but they're not called neurons; they're called neurites, and these are thinking individually, separate from the neurons inside the brain and the neurons in the gut. So these systems, they independently think. So they independently hold information. They independently actually articulate things. So unless you have your adaptability, your ability to mend those parts that have been severed from you, you will never find healing. You'll never find you'll have only portions of it, because the heart knows emotion. The heart knows certain memories that the mind cannot logically supersede or proceed with. So there's a specific way that the mind and the heart mend itself together. It's a dynamic duo, and they always say it takes two to tango. So a lot of times these mechanisms, they were designed, they were divinely designed to work together. However, if you look at society is trying to distract us and keep us from that mind-heart connection. That's how you sever someone from becoming a leader. That's how you sever someone from becoming someone who's going to make an impact or an imprint on someone's life who's hurting. Because these practices, such as meditation, all you're doing is you're dumping out excess noise from the mind so you can get clarity in order to mend that mind-heart connection. There's been documentaries on the power of the heart, where they've done specific studies where they would take EEGs, and the heart actually was able to predict images that were placed on the screen ahead of time that the mind couldn't perceive.
Cool.
So like these neurites, they understand the quantum field around you, and it perceives things quicker than the mind can. So most of the studies have shown that there's this torus field that it exhibits about 6 feet of a radioactive frequency that is outside of the human body. And so that field is what is actually interacting and obtaining information. And so they also measured the brain, and the brain was able to do up to 3 feet. So
Can I dumb this down a little bit
ahead
for the audience? There's a couple words that are important: self-regulation and co-regulation. And if you can't self-regulate, you can't co-regulate. And guess where this is most important? Your children, because they're going to learn how to self-regulate and co-regulate from you. So if you're coming home angry, pissed, sarcastic, not good. Also, Judith Herman, a classic book, Trauma and Recovery, a famous psychiatrist. Healing only happens in a safe relationship. You can't do it solo. But so many of us have trauma bond friends, trauma stuff at work, and we're attracted to people that were repeating unfinished business from our earlier broken relationships. So that's where a therapist can come in. That can be the safe place where there could be coherence, I think is the word that HeartMath would use. But I could use a couple of studies that they use to try to make this just illustrative maybe for the audience. If you hook up, if you come into corporate America and you train people on basic breath work and intention like of peace and love and breath work, and only 2 weeks of training, and you hook everybody up, and you have 2 people in a room that have been trained for 2 weeks, and you bring a third person in that has no idea what's going on, but they're hooked up. If you're looking at HRV, you tell the 2 people to send them peace and love, and they're doing their breath work. This other guy or girl doesn't know what's going on. Their hearts start aligning with the 2 people that are trained. You're talking about 3 or 6 feet. Another one, they took the lead researcher of HeartMath's teenage son many years ago and his dog, and they hooked up the dog and him with all the HRV stuff. And they told the kid, you can go in the room, stay 6 feet away from the dog. You can't talk, you can't touch them. You can just go in and do your breath work and send them intentions. Now I'm bastardizing this. So if there's a HeartMath person out there that wants to like get their pins.
Highly doubt it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the kid comes in, the dog is in a different room than the kid. The kid comes in the room and sends his intention, the dog and the kid. The graphs look the same. He walks out of the room, out of alignment again. It's not aura, it's real. And then they take a baby, an infant with a mom, and I think, I forget which one's hooked. No. Is it the mom is hooked up to, I don't know if it's EEG, and the baby's hooked up to EKG, like heart. And they tell the mom, you can't touch the baby, you can't talk to the baby, but when we tell you, send the baby intentions, you know? So brain, heart, and the EKG and the EEG lined up. Mom to baby. Does that make it a little more understandable? It's not aura.
Yeah.
I walked in the room as a firefighter or a cop, and you could cut the tension with a knife. That's actually not bullshit. Like, they have things that they can measure what's coming off your heart and what's coming out of your brain. And these are things that Patrick and other people there could go much deeper in. But sometimes, like I said earlier, like I've been in HeartMath training or meetings, and then people go real hardcore woo-woo. And then I just know that most dudes are going to be like, fuck this shit.
Right.
That's soft, weak, or gay, So
yeah, 100%.
But there's science behind this
well,
shit.
I think most people who project like that, though, they see things as a threat.
Yes.
Because it threatens their beliefs about something. It threatens their lifestyle. It threatens everything about them that wants to change, but they can't.
But that's usually unconscious. So
yeah,
right.
Well,
so like
I see it though, but what I'm seeing is the threat is because I get made fun of at work for the way I talk, the way I speak, the way I eat. However, that stuff doesn't matter to me because what matters more is frequency. Like I said before, like frequency is what matters the most. If I can sustain that conduit of me, and I cannot be that sometimes, but I can. But my goal is to come back home to myself, come back home to remembering what I am, who I am, and able to embrace that. And I think over time, like we just forget, and that's the problem. But it's all also coming back to remembering. But what's key about this mind-heart coherence, and that the coherence is the key word. That coherence is what is it's not in balance. It's a law. The law of coherence is how it takes the law of attraction. It takes the law of cause and effect, and it bunches it all into one actual frequency to where things are operating and they're not having distortion. So it's hitting every single beat, it's hitting every single rhythm, it's hitting every single frequency in alignment. Now, you can get out of that coherent, you can be incoherent. And I think that's when we live life in incoherency, that's where problems, circumstances are teaching you to come back to coherence. So most of the time, the circumstances we come across, the way we fall forward into the mud all the time, all of that's doing in your life, the death, the rebirths, all of those things, the injuries, the sickness, the disease, it's just teaching you to come back to coherence. And if we see all of these things as just messengers, we get out of our own concept of trying to use PTSD as a mask, or trying to use traumas as a cloak, or trying to use religion as a cloak to not actually face our problems and change.
Who's teaching this type of awareness other than through hardship and then all the mentors? You've talked about that a lot. Like the best even clinicians and clergy I'm aware of that could address this stuff are not people that have websites or Instagram.
Right.
So it's people in our community, police, fire, mental health professionals, peer support, retired or quit because shit happened, which I'm not disparaging that, but I'm saying if that's the only poster for mental health and wellness. And by the way, what you're talking about, whether you're working out more, you're going to therapy, you're meditating, you're eating clean, it's unconsciously holding a mirror up to the guys at work that they're not doing what they should be doing. But again, it's unconscious. And then unless things have changed, there's still going to be the badge of honor for I drank 6 beers before I went to bed. I banged that hot girl. Even if I'm married and nobody calls them out, I bought a new dirt bike, I bought a new truck, or I got a lift kit. And we badge of honor the overtime, the toys, drinking, sleeping around, instead of like, dude, like not in front of anyone, but if you really care about that person, like in private, bro, like what's going on? Obviously, like you're hurting. And this is another reframe. The people that are often the most boisterous and the loudest are the ones that maybe are hurting the most and didn't get the love they needed from somebody along the lines. And if you shame or guilt trip them, they're just going to self-medicate more unconsciously, and you're going to drive them to be more defensive. But like in private, like, bro, like even if you shouldn't be married, because maybe this was an unhealthy relationship based on you not doing your other work, you have 3 children. And if they find out that you've been partying and sleeping around, like you're going to fuck those kids up really bad. And how often does that happen to cops and firefighters and vets? And so can we talk to them, not shame them? And then how do we bring more awareness to all these things you're talking about in a way that cops, firefighters, vets, or the corporate America hard charger listens?
I mean, it takes an army. It takes a legion of people who want to make that change, And I'm only laughing when you're talking because I used to be that person. I used to be that, until life just hit me in the head, literally hit me in the head. And I had to change through my own option of killing myself or whatever it was, right? And so that is just a cry for help. And it's not like isolated events that just like change someone. We forget that it's the timeline that has been progressing over a period of time where you've stopped listening to yourself. You just wanted to be ignorant, and you chose that path because it's easier. And I'm speaking on just the simple interactions you have with people, the simple interactions you have with patients at work, if you're a paramedic, or the simple interactions you have with your colleagues. Like, all of those things matter. And I'm still guilty, man, of just making an idiot out of myself from saying something stupid, or making fun of someone in the fire station because everyone else is. So, I'm not perfect. However, I still see that in myself, and it's an opportunity for me to change that. So in the end, like, if we approach this as individuals who really see what's really going on, then the sharks in the water, like I had mentioned earlier in the episode, they can't survive because there's a purposeful, heartfelt experience that we seek that is timeless, and you can't capitalize on it. So
heartfelt experience is different than knowledge. So you're bringing up really, and this ties into what I would say is unconditional love, or the experience of really being co-regulated, the experience of being seen, heard, understood, not judged, not psychopathologized, that it's a clinical issue, and not given a quick, simple solution to fix. And this is part of healing, and there's science behind this, especially in tribal cultures and with some veteran studies. And this is true peer support. It doesn't have to be people on peer support. Like, who sees me and I can call at 3 a.m. and cry and cuss, and they're not going to judge me. And you know how many badass dudes, special ops, cops, and firefighters I've had that trust me and may have a multiple year relationship with me, lifting, shooting, me riding with them. And still, when they eventually tell me a story, maybe on the retreat that I do every year to Missouri, it's fishing, it's clay pigeon shooting over the lake at night, horseback, ATV. There's no lectures. There's no PTSD stuff. Almost everybody usually shares their story, but it happens all the time where a dude starts sharing his story and it's legit. Like, your dad or stepdad did something that was fucked up. They share that and they tie it to a call, and they tie it to their current marriage. And then they're like, you know what, dude, I'm so sorry. I'm like, what's wrong? I'm being a bitch, fag, crazy, weak, or broken. And it's like, nah, man, you're either a psychopath or a sociopath if these things you've seen at work and the things that happened to you as a kid don't bother you. This is okay. And you pat them on the back and you get out of the way and you let them share and you stay present and be a good listener. And that takes training. If you can't listen to yourself, you can't be present and really listen to others. But these are things that are missing in our culture and are like valid and legitimate to have feelings.
Yeah. I mean, so like, you missed that whole conversation we had, and I was really sad that you missed it, but it was about the capacity to serve. And I think the main conclusion for that topic was the fact that our capacity is a measurement, right? And that measurement, it's if you can see it or visualize a big giant bubble, if you have your own stuff inside and we're all choosing this career path to serve, right? That bubble is going to shrink over time because you've lost the capacity. So you are unable to give more. So if you working at yourself or just trauma dumping on a friend, that capacity, that bubble, that measurement increases a little more, and it increases even more after you make a decision to go to therapy. It increases even more after you make a decision to devote yourself to change. And so these small little changes, these microcosmic changes, they're more than what you believe or think that can open up your life and make an impact or imprint on someone else. So if you just see that conclusion of that concept of capacity to serve, we all want to serve, but unless you serve yourself and you make those small changes, then no one else is going to do it for you. Like, no one else is going to do your own healing. No one else is going to make those changes for you. It's up to you. And I love how, there's this Sanskrit word called the tattvamasi, and it's like every mystic would go through this ladder of reaching enlightenment and trying to escape the samadhi or the inner matrix. And like, they get to this point where they have reached the highest point of enlightenment, or what they call the escape of samadhi. And they call it the tattvamasi. And it says, it's you're the one, because no one can take that responsibility. And they come down and they have this realization like, holy shit, like, I've been putting all of my expectations on some outside circumstance, some outside God, or with some outside spiritual practice, but it came down to me taking responsibility for my life. And so like, when we do take that responsibility, not saying that it's easy, especially someone who's in crisis, and you tell them, hey, it's up to you. that's going to go past them. But if you're
that's
listening,
why I don't want us to wait. Yeah. Don't wait.
So if you're listening to this, we talk about, Matt saying, that check engine light, these things, these concepts, these theories, these abilities, these philosophies, it's all about preventative maintenance. You want to prevent the divorce, or you want to prevent your kid from disdaining you or resenting you and contempt. Your ability to make these microcosmic changes do make an impact, except you can't see it in real time. It doesn't look glorified the way we perceive growth. It doesn't have crisp-cut abs. It's the least sexiest thing you can do when you're walking into a room. However, when you start seeing over time the changes it makes, the impact it makes on the people you really love, that's where real growth comes. And I want to reiterate what growth looks like, because we just want the fireworks. We are addicted to the fireworks. We're addicted to the dopamine response, but that's not how true growth evolves, not how true growth looks. It's like these small little things, man.
It's the training age. If somebody looked up training age, you cannot be good at something until you've done the basics with consistency and discipline over the long haul. So, man, there's a number of things, but like we usually get I start tennis. I've never played tennis. I think I'm doing okay, but somebody points out all the errors. So there's unconscious incompetence. Then they point out the errors, conscious competence. Then I work hard at them. There's conscious competence. Then if I keep working, there's unconscious competence. That takes a long time, right? And another analogy about doing the inner work, let me know if this lands based on some of the things you're saying. A lot of men in general, and then the more machismo of the profession, military, police, fire, corporate America, big shot. Listen, I'm the protector. I'm the provider. I get shit done. I hustle, I grind, and I'm really smart. But if you're the mechanic that spends all your time fixing other people's cars and you never maintain yours, and yours hits 150,000 miles and you've never changed the oil, rotated the tires, or changed the belt, you might break down driving into work. You can't fix anybody else's car unless you're maintaining your own. And we're not teaching operational maintenance to alpha males at all. So, and there was one other thing, man, you're hitting on so many things that I don't think we're bringing awareness to, and just having vulnerable and open discussions with. But there was something else. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Well, I did ask you about the duality. If you don't mind explaining what that is, or even making an attempt.
So the world is not black and white, and this goes back to rigidity, maybe protecting us from uncertainty, or the one that's evangelizing and screaming the loudest for carnivore and CrossFit. Maybe they're not so sure of themselves, because if they were, they'd be happy that you're doing Zumba and Tai Chi. Like, good for you. This is working for you. So this ties into external validation, lack of having that love that maybe you didn't experience, unconditional love from other people. But the further along the journey, the world is not black and white. It's not this or that. It's not who's in and who's out. It could be this and that, black and white and 1,000 shades of gray. And these are things that go back to the experience, where if a lot of your stuff is intellectual knowledge, go ahead and read books about meditation and neuroscience for 10 years, but don't meditate. You don't know. You don't understand what meditation is. Just like a spiritual experience, whether it's with or without medicine, and that gets into a messy clusterfuck too, because a lot of people, as we've talked offline, maybe aren't doing the proper preparation and integration. But you don't really truly know something until you've experienced it. And we're not giving experiential learning opportunities for men to maybe take the armor off, I say. Like, take the armor off. And just because somebody is from a different group doesn't mean they're a total pussy and there's nothing that I can learn from them. And if all you're doing is hanging out with warrior archetype people, and even if the lover archetype people are only hanging out with lover archetype people, like, everybody's limited and we're staying tribal. And politics is the best example. Like, let me find out who you voted for president or what party you are, and let me draw a line. I get triggered. It's unconscious, and fuck you. We're on different teams. I mean, that's how our culture is. And there's another book, Righteous Mind, by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, that talks about how even when we're confronted, even psychologists that study moral psychology are confronted with evidence opposite their opinion, they double down on their emotional opinion. And it takes work. Or have you read Eckhart Tolle? You see him?
The Power of Now. I think
yes.
Yeah.
So that book repeats over and over again, like how, like, if we see something that's unconscious in someone else, And then we try to point it out unless they're ready to drink the water or they want the mirror held up that you're eating cleaner at work, so they break your balls and they keep eating McDonald's. If you tell them why you're eating clean and they're eating McDonald's and they don't want to hear it, they're going to double down on eating McDonald's and fuck you and be defensive. And then the more you try to rationalize eating McDonald's is bad for them, or drinking beer or chewing or cheating on their wife, well, now you make yourself unconscious. You're triggered because you're trying to use logic and reason with somebody that's not being logical. So the non-dualistic stuff is hard because I've said this for years at some of the men's groups that I'm now speaking at. I'm like, you guys are not welcoming, because they very often, a lot of the groups that teach non-dualistic spirituality or thinking tend to be left-leaning, and they double down on flagpole planning around DEI and LGBTQ. And then they virtue signal, even if it's 99% rich, straight white guys. I'm like, what do you guys like? Or in Manhattan Beach, when I lived in Manhattan Beach, my neighbors all liked me. But they would always, I never said I was conservative, but they knew I was an ex-cop veteran and I support vets and cops. And they'd be like, for a conservative, Matt, even theology professors at LMU, you're so nice for a conservative. You're so nice for a cop. Like, what the hell? And then the BLM riots came, and Manhattan Beach had 5 police departments and the sheriff's department. So a lot of these very virtue signaling people could say that we're screwing the blacks over, right? Protected by all the cops in your little white town. And I'd ask my neighbors, when's the last time you volunteered in Lawndale or South LA or Inglewood or Hawthorne? These are 5 minutes down the road. You could go volunteer or donate money or do something. And everybody had BLM signs. And one of my neighbors that had 2 houses on the Strand, one empty, 2 houses on the Strand. For those that aren't from here, those are 10, 20 million a piece. BLM sign. And I saw a little kid knock on the door selling candy, a black kid. And it was assistant. A lot of people have assistants there. Well, the lady with the BLM signs came out and started yelling at the kid and said, obviously you don't live in this neighborhood. You're taking up the time of my assistant. And if you don't leave, I'm going to call the cops. So that's the person with the BLM sign that's probably telling me, Matt, you are supporting all these racist cops in Torrance and South LA. And you're the one that's going to call a cop on the black kid for selling candy and you just chewed him out. There's an incongruency and how people are living their lives and living in their bubbles. And we're not going to learn about other people until we don't get triggered and we try to spend some time with the other, whoever the other is. And that's really difficult. And I probably didn't make non-dualistic any clearer, but even the groups teaching non-dualistic often are virtue signaling with the victim mindset around political stuff. And that's in the yoga and the Buddhist community and the contemplative Christian community. And so it's like, well, the cops, firefighters, vets, or corporate America, ex-athletes I know, they're not going to want to be around that. Even my friends that are liberal don't want to be around the complaining about politics with the victim mindset, then virtue signaling, social justice warrior stuff on Nextdoor, Instagram, or LinkedIn, and then getting tribal. So look at yourself. Like, do you have any friends or mentors or elders that are not whatever? Are you a conservative MAGA firefighter that's into, and I'm not picking on CrossFit and jiu-jitsu, but those are like easy things to get real tribal. Like, can you hang out with somebody that's Democrat? Can you hang out with somebody that does Kung Fu, even if Kung Fu may not work in a real fight, instead of saying Kung Fu's bullshit? Jiu-jitsu is the only way to learn how to fight on the streets. And what if somebody likes going to Pilates and they don't like power cleans and snatches? Is there something to learn from them? Maybe I'm dumbing it down too much. But can you sit with other people with different opinions and values than you, as long as they're not being harmful and they're also open to dialogue? If you enter every conversation in your life ready to defend and correct, that's not real communication. That's not real presence. That's not real dialogue. Like, what can I learn that I have in common with this other human being? And this is where cops and firefighters should know. And some of them do become better people. I've met cops and firefighters that are better than mental health professionals dealing with people in crisis because they've been around so much suffering. And it doesn't matter. They're not asking what religion they are or what political party they are. And obviously they're often a different color and a different type of neighborhood. And I see cops and firefighters like loving on people. Even if they wouldn't say they're spiritual or they're loving, they very much are. And yet I will also say sometimes those guys are the ones that don't know how to give that love to themselves or their own family, even though they've learned how to do it at work.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing your attempt to do it is the best so someone else can ingest it for non-dualism. And I mean, the best way to explain some of these riddles of life is looking at nature. Like if you see a leaf, that leaf is, how did that leaf become? It came from a tree that came from a roots, that came from a seed. So is that seed that created that tree the same as the leaf? I mean, the answer is that the leaf required that seed in order for it to exist. That's non-dualism. And it seems like a riddle. You're trying to put it all together, but in the end, are they one and the same? I think that's the fact that they required each other in order for them to exist. So like the polarization of good and bad, black and white, they require each other in order for them to exist. They cannot exist without the other. Like the Republican Party cannot exist without the Democratic Party. They wouldn't exist. We would be in a monolithic society. So these things, when we see the bigger picture and you get out of your own self-righteousness in it, you can value one and the other, and you actually see it, they're one and the same without freaking out. So that's the biggest part, is your attempt to stay neutral and seeing things without getting your own self-interest, your own self-righteousness, your own identities involved is really the trick. It's a shadow on the wall the entire time. And when we're looking at mirrors, in the end, when you come down to your inner light, your inner nature, when you look at a mirror, it becomes an empty mirror. It means that there's nothing there, because in the end, there is nothing to forgive. There's nothing to seek. There's nothing to find, because you're already whole again. And that's the problem, I think, when we start diagnosing, we start putting labels on things, we put people in boxes, we start making and creating these false constructs, they're cages, when in the end, you already have the key to unleash yourself and have inner freedom, inner liberation. And that's why we always latch on to these great mystics like Jesus the Christ and like Buddha and all these things, because they were able to liberate themselves and trying to teach something. Mm-hmm. But we've missed the teaching. That's the problem, because we've tried to encage and make statues of these people and idolize them without taking what they're saying and living by it.
Follow them. It's not necessarily worship them. And something else you're bringing up is projection and shadow. And what projection is, so whether you're watching a movie or you're talking to a neighbor, you hear a story about somebody and you internally get triggered and overreact and talk shit, whether out loud or to your friends about somebody else at work or somebody on the news, a politician or somebody on Nextdoor. If it's an overreaction, if they're not harming you and they're not like really a complete idiot that's harming other people, what is it that gets you so fired up about them? Because often that's what is the projection identifies sometimes our shadow. And our shadow is disowned, unowned, rejected, denied aspects of ourselves. And when it shows up in others, unconsciously, we get really triggered. So it's an overreaction. If there's 4 of you hanging out and somebody comes up, a supervisor says something, and maybe he is a dick, and he walks away and 3 of you are like, that guy's a dick. Let's get on the rig and take care of this call, right? But the 4th guy that night, even after you get done running all your calls and you're making dinner, that guy's still letting that shit about the supervisor trigger him. What lesson is in that for you? Mm. There may be something about that dude that relates to some unfinished business in yourself that you haven't looked at, and that's why it's upsetting you. And then we'll play mental gymnastics to deny it. But that's where elders and mentors and good therapists and good chaplains or spiritual directors and calming down your physiology and looking at your EEG, the Joe Dispenza type stuff, you can check your loop. But projection and shadow are 2 topics. And James Hollis is a great author. And one of his books is very important for a lot of people in our community, Under Saturn's Shadow, The Wounding and Healing of Men. And it'll cover a lot of these topics, or audible versions for our guys that don't read, which is a lot of them, or girls out there too that are trying to fit in with the guys in these professions. Through the Dark Woods on Audible. Through the Dark Woods, James Hollis. Listen to that, and also talking all the nature stuff. Bill Plotkin's Soulcraft, very good Audible. I can vouch for both of those because sometimes you buy an Audible and the voice or the speed sucks. Through the Dark Woods, James Hollis, Soulcraft, Bill Plotkin's. Smarter people than me that are explaining a lot of things that you and I are talking about.
Yeah, I like those references. I have to look through the Dark Woods. It sounds like it speaks to me. Like I want to read it.
Nice.
But I think so. Like here's a good concept. If I'm holding a laser pointer and I'm pointing at the wall, And that, if we're just looking at the wall and you see that laser pointer, am I holding the laser pointer? Are we one and the same? Is that laser pointer the same thing as a laser? Or all we see is just the laser on the wall? So that these are questions that I always ask, or who's holding the laser? You know, so like my beliefs are that every single little thing, every single creation, it's a reflection, it's a piece of consciousness itself trying to experience itself in an experience. Now, if that's too deep for someone, it's basically the fact that everything you see in yourself is in something else. So treat it as such. And if you don't, then that's something it's reverberating back to you for you to see it. Something that you're not integrating, that's in or out of coherence. So like most of the things we want to do or fix or heal is the things we don't like and the things we don't want to face. And I think most of this goes into abiding by the law of life or the law of nature, or the law of the universe. And if we can look to abide by these laws, then we can be in coherence. So I did want to talk about, you mentioned to me a lot about plant medicine. And that was like some of the first like text you gave me, because you were like asking me, like, hey man, how are you like doing this? And because I've had a lot of people talk about every single little medicine that is able to be used for therapeutic use.
Yeah.
I've had a Navy SEAL come on here talk about he serves Iboga, and he's been to the Bwiti tribes and has been serving Iboga ever since. I've had people who have served ayahuasca on here talking about the nature of that medicine, how it's been hugely used, but also abused on this planet as of right now. Psilocybin and psilocybin treatments, how effective they've been for people with brain trauma and also rewiring their brain. And I've had a fire chief talk about his treatment with psilocybin. I've had agencies talk about their ketamine assisted therapies have been really effective. A lot of these things are tools to be used and be really effective. And I just hate for it to be marketed just for first responders because they see us as the most traumatized. But I am curious, why you brought that up and stuff, and what your personal experience you've seen around it.
How do we do this shortly? So I first heard about, well, first of all, growing up, I didn't know they were psychedelics. 40 years ago, LSD will fry your brain, like the Nancy Reagan TV commercials. So never smoked weed. I drank beer, but I quit drinking at 20 and had my spiritual conversion. Then for people that are familiar with MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, it's taught at Insight LA here. It's taught at universities. It's how they brought Buddhist meditation into hospitals, but they stripped the Buddhism and just make it the techniques. And I've been meditating and doing contemplative prayer for 30 years in different traditions. And I've immersed myself with teachers and mentors and retreats and workshops. So I was in MBSR, and in my small group was a therapist and a surgeon and a couple other people, but they brought up medicine like over 10 years ago. And then somebody at my Velocity Sports Performance that played hockey for Harvard and had an MBA from Kellogg Business School. So like super successful people tell me about psychedelic retreats. And I'm like, dude, you're a doctor, you're a therapist, and you guys are doing drugs? So I remember going all the way back then, being like, what are you guys doing drugs for? And they tried to say, hey, that's not what it's for. And then fast forward, prior to the pandemic, I was in peer support meetings where cops started asking therapists about psychedelics, and the police and fire psychologists can't comment on that, don't know anything about it. And then even though I was a chaplain in peer support going back 20 years, I don't think I get treated as regular peer support or chaplain because people tell me a lot of shit. And there's a lot of cops and firefighters prior to the pandemic that are getting ketamine troches sent home. They're not in therapy, or they're tripping balls because they've heard about somebody using psychedelics to, quote, cure PTSD. So I was like, God damn, a lot of people I care about are doing this stuff, but without any bumpers in place. And it sounds like a lot of times, and even once I started meeting the SEALs and the Green Berets that did it, they didn't have a safe container. So they're cheating on their spouse is cheating on them, all their buddies are drinking and chewing and screwing, and they trip balls and they have experience of unitive consciousness, unconditional love or forgiveness, and they come back to a broken marriage, and then they just try to evangelize the medicine as the answer to their partner and to their friends. And then there are people that often end up having to just keep doing medicine. And shortly after they do the medicine, they're the shaman or the life coach for other people. They haven't even tapped into their stuff, even though psychedelics will do an explosive breach on your unconscious. And you should have a really good entry team, an experienced entry team, not a bunch of rookies holding the perimeter. But a lot of the times these retreats for first responders and veterans, sometimes because they don't have the money, they're doing an explosive breach. And then you got a team guy that his dad sodomized him and he's killed a bunch of kids in war and he barely did his own work. And now he's your life coach and has no training in the unconscious or in spiritual experience. And that's what happens. Unconscious stuff comes up. Those are where you would want a psychoanalytic or psychodynamic therapist and a spiritual director or clergy trained in spiritual experience, which is the contemplative traditions, which most clergies and chaplains don't have any training. And that's what even John Hopkins in the research says, people are having a spiritual experience, but the clergy and clinicians don't have training in it. So I started talking to doctors and reading all the books and going down the rabbit hole. And a doctor said, let's do ketamine. And I was like, fuck you, I'm not doing drugs. And then I go talk to another doctor and I start talking to people I really trust. And they're like, Matt, you're friends with all these special ops guys. They're doing it and there is research. So eventually I end up legally finding ways to participate in these things. And I will say, well, I'll give you my first ketamine experience to kind of illustrate. And then there's been other medicines, and I don't know if I really want to share all the different medicines I've tried, but I do want to share what they've done for me. And within 5 minutes of doing ketamine, I told the psychiatrist, and by the way I've done ketamine is much different than a lot of people are doing it. You can get an IV, you can get shots at home now, you can do troches. And I know cops that are doing this, but not taking care of themselves. It's an escape, not doing the work. I do an hour of neurofeedback first, the alpha theta. So I'm meditating. And then I do an hour of talk therapy. And then I put these blinking lights on with some acoustic stuff that does stuff to your brain waves. Then I have to meditate again. And then we do aromatherapy. And then I get hit with the ketamine. And then we're doing therapy while I'm on the ketamine and then therapy for an hour after I'm off. So the first time I did it, before I tripped, right after something called the flight instructions, my left ear started ringing. And I've done thousands of hours of neurofeedback, hundreds of hours of sensory deprivation float tanks, meditation. And I was like, hey, doc, this is like day 9 or 10 of a Vipassana retreat. Vipassana is like 10 or 12 hours a day, Buddhist meditation. And I went to see Mary Jo Meadow. You could look her up. She's an expert in Buddhism, trained by Joseph Goldstein, who's an OG. She's an expert in St. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, the contemplative Christians, yoga, and she's a psychologist. So I wanted to go do this 10-day retreat with somebody that understood all the traditions. And to prepare for this retreat, I was doing neurofeedback 2 or 3 days a week, sensory deprivation float tank an hour and a half a day after my workouts. I was seeing my spiritual director, who's also a trained therapist and depth psychologist, once a week. And I was meditating 2 hours a day at home and going to one hour, 15-minute yoga class with more traditional breath work and stuff, 5 to 6 days a week for like 3 months. So I was training myself to do 10 days of silence. And there's a lot of different silent retreats, but these ones, there's no reading, no writing, no roommate, no looking in anybody's eye. The only time you look in somebody's eye is the 1 hour a day that she's doing the Dharma talk. Otherwise, it's allowing the unconscious to surface. So does it make sense? I boot camped for this 10 days by doing a lot of neurofeedback, float tank, 2 hours a day of meditation, yoga every day, seeing my therapist, my spiritual director. And I do the EEG and the heart math. So I know for me, when I have an alpha theta crossover, I know what that's like. It's not me sleeping, because they can tell when you're sleeping. Oh, that was a dream. No, that was something released from the unconscious. Within 5 minutes of a ketamine shot, I was like, doc, this is like day 10 of a Vipassana retreat. But after 20 years of my collective training age practice, and then 3 months of that, like doubling down on everything. And if people aren't familiar, like Google neurofeedback, Google sensory deprivation float tank, plus doing yoga, plus doing dream analysis. So I was like, damn, this stuff fast tracks you somewhere special that would take decades of training. And most people, especially if they're hurting, depression, anxiety, trauma, you're going to start going to yoga and sit in a float tank and go on silent retreats like me. It ain't going to happen. So I can see the benefit, but if you're just doing life coaching sessions with the retired cop or Green Beret that just tripped 2 years ago, I don't know if you're playing mental gymnastics, that you have really done all the work. and they're just cracking it open. And even the retreats like the Boulder Crest, Save a Warrior, there's retreats that I would encourage people to look up and apply to if they're hurting. And I wish they weren't just for when you're hurting. I wish the Odyssey wasn't Bud's Odyssey. Not, how about people that got 2 years on the job? You've seen enough shit. Let's have you do some of these left to bang. If they work right a bang, they work left to bang, and you can learn to brush and floss before you get a cavity. You can get fit before you have a heart attack. Can we do this with the consciousness, with trying to have an experience of unconditional love? You can cultivate this through meditation, yoga, journaling, therapy, spiritual direction. The medicine ultimately is love. And so I've been on retreats and I've done a number of medicines, and I haven't had miraculous healing, but what I've had is, and there's another one that I will tell you offline because I don't want to share details on here, because I don't want to be somebody that's marketing these or saying, take a year, unless you're suicidal. If you can afford it, get in therapy and share your story for 6 months or a year. So you have a therapist that knows your story, that you have trust and rapport. And then when you go do medicine a year from now, you can come back and share what happened. Have a yoga group or a Buddhist meditation group or a prayer group that might be open to it, but that might be hard. And that's another rabbit hole. Have boundaries. If your marriage isn't healthy, clean that up before you go do medicine, and start having boundaries around unhealthy family of origin. You may have toxic people in your family, toxic people at the firehouse that are not going to help your healing. You want people to support and affirm what happens when you go do the medicine, if you're going to do the medicine. So create that safe container, that co-regulation, and have a healthy support system to come back. Just like, don't start TRT at a men's clinic. Let a doctor clean up your sleep, your nutrition, your working out, and your stress management. So I've done medicines where some of them they videotape when I've been on it. And I'm like, I literally said, you took me to the source and I knew this was the truth all along. Pause. And I'm like, fucking beautiful. And then I pop up. I'm like, whatever's in there, I've already had before. I know I'm loved, and I got stuff going on that's going to take work. So what I've experienced on the medicine is what I've experienced through prayer and meditation. Decades, though. Does it make sense that it's like it took decades of prayer, meditation, journaling, therapy, spiritual direction, thousands of hours of neurofeedback, hundreds of hours of a sensory deprivation flow tank to get bits and pieces of what the medicine will give you. It'll allow you to blow the doors off your unconscious, but you have a good entry team to deal with what comes up. And don't think that you cleared the house with 5 life coaching sessions. So the medicine sometimes can become another addiction for people to avoid dealing with the pain, unless there's other healthy people around it. And I've met a lot of people, even the therapists and the yoga and the meditation instructors involved with the medicine, that are people that say the medicine's the whole answer. And they overemphasize the medicine's work versus the preparation and the integration, which is all these other lifestyle things, and working on the love, the self-love, working on being around other people that love you for who you are, that see, hear, understand, don't judge, don't try to fix, and can listen and be present to you. And so my suggestion is, don't watch the documentary and then say, because the SEALs just did that, and there's more podcasts. And
you're talking about In Waves and War.
Yes. Yeah. Great documentary, but they don't talk about all the other work that could be done. And I would challenge you, unless you're suicidal, because I do know people that even at a gong show retreat without good support, they don't want to kill themselves. And that's the same. And I'll put this out there, not from me, from people smarter than me. If you're suicidal or have severe depression, like I would want you to do ketamine assisted therapy so you can talk while you're on it and do talking after you do it. But you can do a IV ketamine, and some people, it stops the suicidal ideation dead in its tracks. It kind of gets your head above water. And then maybe you get some lifeguards to help you at that point. But peer support and mental health, I've tried to talk about some of this stuff, and it's because I don't want to say that ketamine's the answer or psychedelics, but you better talk about it, because you know what? There's a bunch of cops and firefighters, active duty, that are doing shit on their own. Where are they buying the meds? Is the meds even legit? And they're doing it at home with their wives because they're hurting. So we should be talking about how you can do this stuff in a more responsible manner. And I would encourage you, if you could, ideally, 6 months at least, try to be in therapy, try to go get your blood test done, try to start taking care of your health now, unless you're just so desperate, and try to have the boundaries around your relationships, work on them now, and go to a first responder, a veteran retreat where you share your feelings without medicine. That's the hardest thing for most of us to do. Go share your feelings without medicine. And then eventually when you go on a medicine retreat, you'll maximize it. Kind of like when they say doing steroids or TRT, you want to maximize your natural potential before you do a steroid cycle. Does that make sense? Like people that are in the lifting, like, dude, I haven't lifted that long. I haven't eaten clean. Let me blast a cycle or get on TRT. No, lift hard, eat clean, pay attention to sleep and stress. All right, I've maxed this out. Now let me do TRT or steroids. I suggest the similar type of framework for psychedelics if it's possible. And then if you look up guys like Robin Carhart Harris, he's like one of the researchers that will give you all like a lot of the science. And there's other people too. And there's other documentaries out there that I think are really good that go over the neuroscience and things like that. But I don't hear enough people. And even the studies I'm aware of with MDMA that have helped combat vets and even cancer patients with mushrooms, they're people that were in therapy before they did medicine. They were in therapy on the medicine. Mm. And then they go to therapy after the medicine to talk about what comes up.
Are you talking about Dosed, the documentary? Have you seen that?
Is that a newer one? Because that sounds familiar, but I think it's on my list.
Well, that was a woman who had cancer, and she did a hero dose of psilocybin, and then after she was going through therapy, and she ended up doing psilocybin. She's like in her mid-50s or something like that, and then it came to a point where the doctor kept wanting to cut into her, and she's like, "No, I'm just gonna take this terminal diagnosis and treat it another way." And so she did this small, short program. It was an end of life psilocybin treatment. And so she ended up doing it. And then, she was stacking her treatments. So she was doing psilocybin along with some, it's called Rick Simpson oil. It's like some cannabis oil that's been known to treat tumors. And so, but after her first hero dose of psilocybin, she was able to leave. And she said that was the most spiritual experience she's ever had. And she's gone to church her whole life. But after that treatment, she continued to do more hero doses with the Rick Simpson oil, and she went into remission. And so the whole story is essentially like it's a tool, right? It helps us to see our blind spots, and it helps us to reveal our truest nature and reconnect ourselves to our spirit, however you want to deem that or personify it. But that was just how that story goes in Dosed. It's a two-story documentary where the other documentary is a woman's addicted to opiates, and she goes through some psilocybin treatment, and then that prepares her for going into an ibogaine treatment where she gets out in remission of her own addiction issues, where she never touched opiates again. But yeah, the topic of discussion is really, I love hearing your perspective. It's beautiful, and I think it's important to hear everyone else's personal experiences, and along with how do we titrate regulation? How do we titrate integration? How do we understand how to manage each approach towards the medicines? Because I believe after having so many different episodes on ibogaine or so many different episodes on ketamine treatments, I'm just an open book, an open portal, an open platform to have people talk about these things, because there's a lot of hushed voices around this, and there's a lot of hushed voices around the firehouse or at the police stations, like, hey, I found out about this. I saw this documentary, but there's not constructive conversations around the approach towards how I'm going to do this medicine. What is this medicine going to do for me? And what this medicine is specialized in? Because I think tremendously for these Navy SEALs, they've had the brain trauma stuff. And so they've leaned in towards the ibogaine because the effects and the science around just healing the neurology of the brain is just tenfold. I mean, guys would have black spots on their brain, and they go do a scan before ibogaine and then a scan after. Those black spots are gone. The medicine completely rewires and revamps the dopamine receptors, the serotonin receptors, and also your opiate receptors, and completely revamps your limbic system and completely changes the structure of your entire brain. So there's a great things that you can come across with these medicines, but I think there is also an opportunity where it could also push someone deeper into the deep end, where they have to face their shit, and it's dark, and it's like deep trauma they've just stuffed down into the deep of their subconscious, and like now it's revealed. It's really difficult to integrate that. So that's in
that documentary. You remember the one guy does Bufo, and he pops up.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He pops up and he's like, there was a box with rusty chains back there. Like he popped out of it and was like, I never thought I would deal with that. So, I mean, you hear the success, but what if you blow the doors off and there's a bunch of gangsters with guns and you don't have a good entry team? So, and I haven't watched that other documentary.
It's a good documentary. It's a really good one.
And something that I do tell, so if you're special ops, you can go on 100 free retreats of all kinds. So they are really blessed. But sometimes some of those guys will say, well, then guys don't take it serious because we get everything for free. Mm-hmm. So there are some police and fire organizations, and some of the veteran ones may help a cop or firefighter, but then it's like, do you have time to take off? How bad are you hurting? Can you let your agency know, even if you go south of the border and it makes it legal? So what I tell people, at least now, ketamine-assisted therapy is legal everywhere in the country. Mm-hmm. So you can research ketamine-assisted therapy, and then hopefully that gets you into therapy as well. And I mean, if you're suicidal with severe depression, you can still do a ketamine IV or injection. And I will mention a book, if you want to learn about this, it's The Truth Medicine, Dr. Michael Sapiro. I've been on a retreat with him and his people and became close. It's a bunch of first responders in Boise, Idaho, that they have a psychologist that also used to be a Buddhist monk. He's a really funny, tatted up, interesting guy. That's their psychologist. And then I haven't been able to make some of the other retreats, but they're non-medicine retreats where we do meditation, where we do yoga. We're in outdoors in Idaho. And he recently wrote a book called The Truth Medicine. And compared to a lot of the other ways people are presenting it, he talks about how there's so much more work than just doing the medicine. And it's not just about ketamine-assisted therapy, but he does that with a lot of first responders. And so there is a book that talks a lot about first responders and veterans doing therapy with the different types of medicine, and that's legal. But I would not want anybody to think that you can go, don't think that EMDR, stellate ganglion block, or even a ketamine is going to do everything for you, or starting TRT. What are your workouts and nutrition going to be for your mind and your heart? And like you said, what if this shit comes up that you buried? And I won't use names or complete details of stories of all these years of me. Even before I was quote a chaplain, even when I was a cop, I was the religious guy that cussed that, you know, when the chaplains couldn't come or victim services, like, yo, Matt, like, go handle this shit. And so many times I've dealt with cops and firefighters in recovery. They sober up, they detox, and they start talking to me. And then I hear that I've never told anybody this before. And then I haven't remembered this in 20 years. And they tell me something about childhood abuse or something else that they've buried, that's the locked box and rusty chains that's been so disassociated and compartmentalized and buried that they forgot it happened. And this is science too. Until we often disassociate until somebody co-regulates us, who becomes the safe person, and then we may vomit that shit on them. And hopefully it's somebody that's trained for it. But we all need a safe person. We have to be safe in our body, a safe container, safe in my own physiology, and at least one safe relationship to share those deep, dark secrets. And it may not be the person saying that wants to fix and help you. There's a lot of the people that want to do the fixing and helping to avoid their own work. Mental health people, clergy, and peer support people. So be careful. And it's hard to be careful when you're hurting and you're desperate. When you're drowning, you want somebody to throw you a rope with knots on it. You know, like, you want certainty. So the charismatic, I got the answer for you. That often happens. So can you look into this stuff before you're at rock bottom? And mental health and wellness doesn't apply to just the big traumas. It's often death by 1,000 cuts. You did not have to have childhood trauma or have to dump somebody as a cop or have a baby that died on you as a firefighter. Those things are legit, and I've heard the stories over and over. But the cumulative shit, the betrayal by work comp, the betrayal by the chain of command, stacked on top of all the suffering that you're immersed in as a cop and a firefighter, dude, that shit's real. Start learning how to brush and floss your teeth now, because that's like drinking Coke and eating candy every day. But we're not teaching post-traumatic growth. Boulder Crest is another organization that has the science behind post-traumatic growth. How do you lean into your adversity? You know, and I think those are things we should be teaching. Post-traumatic growth, things about depth psychology, things from the contemplative spiritual traditions, which are not tied into religiosity or churchianity the way a lot of people think, because it also deals with how do you deal with pain and suffering and still find meaning in it. And Yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question about psychedelics. There's neuroscience behind it. And after somebody that's done thousands of hours of therapy, spiritual direction, meditation, yoga, journaling, silent retreats and different traditions, and the neurofeedback that I know what that does, like the medicine blows the doors off your unconscious without having to have all the training. And like you said, depending on the entry team, it may turn you around.
Yeah, I think it can backfire. But if you look at everything as a mirror, you know, these medicines are great tools. You know, some of these medicines are completely sacred. They've been around for thousands of years. But if you use them as, it's just going to mirror you back to yourself. So when you take the approach of, man, I'm going to do this because I do want to face the things that I'm unaware of, you know, and I take time to integrate that with the proper tools. And then you come back with a different sovereign space within yourself. Those medicines will also teach you after that time period has passed. So these medicines, when I'm talking more about the sacred medicines, the ones that like the big dogs, I would say ayahuasca and iboga, those are master plants and in reverence to the indigenous people that's been supporting them and kept them sacred for thousands of years. And so those are the bigger dogs that will teach on top of whatever you were looking to integrate. And they used the teachings of the wisdom of the plant to start to enable you to further reach another sovereign space within yourself. So then that's a time period to, okay, now I've reached a different level of myself. Now I'm going to move to integrate that and then reach on a different checkpoint in your life. And so I think when it's approached and with a certain way, with a certain level of dignity and also reverence, then it can become something different. And so I think that's why it's such a great aspect of a conversation to kind of see things as a mirror. You know, your relationship with your wife or your spouse is a mirror. The relationship with your kids is a mirror. The relationship with the person you hate the most at the firehouse or the police station is a mirror, because we're seeking something that we don't like in ourselves that we want to have an emotional response about because we're addicted to that. And so these are like the small nuances that we are afraid and unwilling to witness. But when you take that approach, I think it really brings the totality in it all. And when we start to face things with a totality approach, that we're ignorant to the totality, that we're ignorant to the bigger picture, and we take responsibility for that, I think that really allows us to take kind of like the, I would say a grounded, full anchored approach. Because the further you sink that anchor in within yourself, the further you sink it in, the storms come, and you're more resilient to those storms. You're more resilient to the circumstances in life because you've understood, you've built information surrounding the things you're unwilling to face. And once you have that, you have the better understanding. I think that's when we start to really find healing in a sense. You know, for some reason when you were talking, I was thinking of this memes, and I've been really like fascinated with memes lately. I'll do this meme post dump, and it's this woman, she's crying and she has an arrow in her back with a crowd of her shadows. And the person helping her is another woman who has 10 arrows in her back. And I was like, man, that's so true. Like when we go through life and we help people, like this one little arrow is just devastating this person, but this other person that's helping has got 10 arrows in their back still. Because it's not like we've gotten rid of our wounds. We've just integrated them. We've acknowledged them. And when we do that, that's what helps us to help other people. And for someone like yourself, you know, you speak with such validity and confidence, and like you've been able to just understand every single practice and also use them because they've been effective. But also you still have those arrows in your back, man, and you're willing to use that experience to help another person who's got that one arrow.
Can I throw out a couple things?
Yeah.
First of all, I don't have certitude on anything. And again, this is either I'm an idiot or there's other people that are talking shit. But dude, I haven't figured out how to stay fit without still working out and eating clean. I haven't figured that out. So I haven't figured out my mental and spiritual health without still working on it. Now, another big thing out there is for Christians. And I'm not telling any Christian to do meditation or yoga. That's a whole thing depending on your orientation. Like, can you do these other spiritual practices as a way to have intention to grow closer to your Christian God? But if the psychedelic thing comes up, I think the title of the book is Sacred Knowledge, and I think it's Dr. William Richards, who's a big dog in a lot of the documentaries. The documentaries never mention that he also has a master's of divinity. So he's a PhD in psychology. And that book, from what I recall, dives into some of the great spiritual theology and spiritual experience stuff. Another author, Dr. Ron Cole Turner, he has a book that I think is, the title has Christianity and Psychedelics in it. And it's a short, easy to read book that's tons of references on the research of how it also brings up the problem. Hey, most clergy and mental health professionals are not trained in spiritual theology or depth psychology, but this is the type of symbolic stuff that can often happen on there. But there's so many Christians, the veterans and first responders I've known, that do medicine and they have a deep experience of this unconditional love I'm talking about. It's not going to church saying, I believe in this, I followed all the rituals, shit has hurt me bad. And there's something called the image of God. It's a theological concept that is usually derived from our early authority figures, mom and dad, and whatever church we maybe went to. And we often have this idea of a punishing God. If you've had pain, if you've had suffering, and also this is other theological concepts that would take forever, like the theory of original sin, which there's some mistranslated words, and also which is your take on salvation. These are big things I'm going to dump out, but we can't go into. But did God have to murder and torture his own son because we are such filthy pieces of shit? Or did Jesus die because he loved us? And so I have somebody that's experienced unjust suffering and still chose to sacrifice their life for me. And right, Jesus had doubts on the cross in one of the Gospels. Jesus wanted the Father to take the cup from him in the garden as sweat and blood. It wasn't like Jesus was confident when he's being tortured and facing death. So that makes it, maybe is that okay for us as Christians to know there's going to be darkness and pain and suffering? And so a lot of times the church experience can make us feel judged and alienated. The hypocritical Christians, like, dude, when I used to get introduced at police departments as a chaplain, dude, people like ran out of the room like there's an active shooter call, unless I got introduced as a former cop or somebody already knew me. Oh, I used to lift weights and do Krav Maga and Muay Thai with Matt. And he used to be a cop. Okay, I'll sniff his butt. But if it's like religion, bad. Religion, bad. So you can read those books, as well as my experience has been people that have fallen away from their faith because it was dogmatic. And those childhood rules of right and wrong and who's burning in hell and who's not didn't match up to the shit they saw as a cop or a firefighter in combat. And you also wonder, how can there be a loving God with all of the suffering we see? Now, if you want to look into that, when bad things happen to good people, Rabbi Harold Kushner, that's an old book that tackles unjust suffering. Again, throwing out references, a lot smarter people than me. But I've met a lot of Christians that have done psychedelics and been like, I've experienced something now that there's like unity with nature. I had this experience with nature. I had this experience with other people. I had this experience with my grandparents. Something happens on the medicine where there's forgiveness, the experience of unconditional love, and now they actually believe in God or a higher power or something they can't define, which, by the way, theologically speaking, God can't describe what God is. So there is more mystery and uncertainty even in this higher power thing for those that believe in it. But so many people with religion act with certainty. And remember, the rigidity protects us from uncertainty, or those who may be yelling the loudest or trying to convince themselves. So they believe in God, and then they're like, where can I find a church and a community to share this? Because also, if you have a spiritual experience, even on a meditation or yoga retreat or with medicine or in your life, I want you to share it, and it's healthy to share it, but be careful who you share it with, because maybe somebody's going to make fun of it, just like they do the eating clean, or you're working out, or you're going to therapy and you're a bitch. And that's not going to be affirming, right? So what do you do? Who's that container? And if you do have an experience where you're like, I believe in God and I want to go back to church, then it's really hard for people to find that fellowship and community, because some people may judge it as not authentic. And so those two books, Sacred Knowledge, I'm pretty sure, Dr. William Richards, Ron Cole Turner, it will be Psychedelics and Christianity, something in the title. But this has also been my collective experience. People come back to church and God, and I think even read the veterans and some of the famous ones like Marcus Luttrell from the Lone Survivor movie. Even though I've had SEALs tell me that movie's not real, so that gets all whatever too. But anyways, that's an interesting thing as a Christian. It may be a question you have to face. And then what is all this stuff we're talking about? And again, the medicine I think is unconditional love. And you may get that through a person at some point that makes you want to believe in a greater good than yourself. It's not all about me. It's not all egocentric. And no matter how hard we work, like we're always going to be battling that ego. You said something earlier like, I still end up at the firehouse breaking balls. Like, dude, nobody ever arrives. And so the people that act like they've arrived, that's the red flag, you know?
Mm. Yeah. Well, thank you, Matt, for being yourself, and just your service to others is really it's an admirable thing. And so I hope to find more people like you who are just no bullshit. Just tell me the truth. Tell me how it is. And I think people they find that as a necessity in someone who they seek to connect with. So we're coming up on over 2 hours here. So I'd love to close on this conversation. I'm sure we could revisit this conversation. I'd be happy to have you back, and I'm sure other people or other listeners would be happy to have you back. So, brother, if you have anything else to say, just to close here.
I would just like to say that this could, to our community, sound gay, because this is what people tell me. And for those that are listening and not watching, I did wear a purple shirt that says "Love Heals," and I do that on purpose. But you are precious and you are worthy of love, like every single one of us. And my feminist theologian therapist friend said to always tell cops and firefighters and vets, there's no shame worth dying for. And she lost somebody close to her through suicide. And I'm not a suicide prevention guy. I'm like, let's do the things. You want a bigger bench and a faster run time? If you think all this spiritual shit we're talking about is bullshit, hey, if you take care of your sleep, your nutrition, your nervous system regulation, your shoot time, your run time, your bench press will go up. And the levers you pull for performance now will be the anchors for the storm. Mm-hmm. So even if you're early in your career, you're still single, you're like, fuck this, I'm running and gunning, or whatever the phrase would be as a firefighter, these things can improve your performance. And then some of them will be the anchors for the storm when it comes. And it's coming to all of us at some point. Mm-hmm. But we're all worthy and deserving of love. And I'm a resource, or, a listening ear for any cop, firefighter, or veteran. And yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I love you guys. Take care.